Okay, so we're live. So, oh wow, you look just like the drawing of yourself.
I mean, I do what I can, right?
Yeah, I don't look like Cam in real life. Yeah, there's a few subtle differences between the two of
I
us.
should grab like your art and just pop it up on the screen next to me or something. No, it's all good.
All right. Let's see. You could put up the D&D Beyond article that was written where you were gonna exclusively DM my group and no one else's. That was, and then the Matt Mercer tweet and all that. Those were good times.
Quality
Uh,
time.
All right, so Afra, you've got us uncontested. So just start rattling off questions, and we'll try to answer them.
See, I was hoping to just listen because I was like,
Oh,
I'm like even too new to even have questions. Like I just my question is kind of what?
Well, I mean that's a fair question, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
okay. So what made you think that you wanted to GM? Because
Well,
you have questions about GMing, right? So you
yeah. So, I have never. So I decided I wanted to play D&D. It was super fun. And I'm excited. Except I want to play with my friends. And none of
mhm.
my friends do it. And none of my friends are particularly interested, but if I pester them enough, I can make them do it.
Mm,
That
I
means
gotcha.
that I pretty much have to be the DM.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So it's one of those things like you want to have a steady group in WoW, so you became a tank. I gotcha.
Yeah.
or a healer.
Or a healer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that you're kind of like having to do both when you're a GM for
Yeah.
sure.
Mm.
All right. Well, that could be an interesting situation. When you are essentially trying to corral a specific group of people into being your players. Because like the game that you're in that I run on Sundays, like
Mhm.
everybody who's in that group like wants to be in that group. They want to play D&D. They like,
Yeah.
submit an application to join it. They literally like, pay dues towards like, having cool maps and all the other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like you're enjoying right now like the hobbyist side of the game, which is
Mhm.
where everybody is living for it, like
Mhm.
when it's time to level up, they have already planned their level up. When it's their turn in combat, they've been waiting for that turn to come up, and they know their spell, they know their ability, they're going to try to use it, they've got big plans. When you are bringing more casual people into the game, you're going to get a different like flavor of game. It's going to be a
Yeah.
lot it's going to be a lot more like we're here to hang out with each other cuz we're all friends, and also
Mhm.
Dungeons and Dragons is going to be happening.
Mhm.
So that's definitely something to kind of keep in mind. Like a lot of people get frustrated because they like watch Critical Role or whatever, and they're like, my game's going to be just like that. And it's like those people are the literal definition of professional Dungeons and Dragons players. Like that
Yeah.
is that is their job, is to all sit down and play Dungeons and Dragons. If you convince your friend to give it a shot, they might really enjoy it, but they might also want to check on their phone messages, and they might also want to secretly be on Facebook, instead of their D&D Beyond character sheet. They might want to spend 20 minutes at the beginning of the game telling everybody this amazingly funny thing that happened to them.
Yeah. The
You
good
know?
news with that though is that
Yeah,
that lowers the stakes for you as a new DM, right?
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
like because you're just there to have fun with your friends at that point, and
Yeah.
like if they walk away going like, "Hey, that was fun," then you have done everything that you needed to do for that session, and so your stakes are really low, and
Yes.
yeah, it's pretty like it's that double sided thing. Like
Mhm.
long term, you might be able to kind of pull some of them into that like, hey, this is a thing that we're actually going to care about and stuff. But it's kind of nice because
Yeah.
it'll just start out as like a very uh, very even kind of simple sort of thing where if you just get through like a combat and some story, they're probably going to be a little happy, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a totally different feel, and it's also one of those things that you want to kind of discuss with your friends before you get started, because you might have some friends who are super casuals that in your heart of hearts they're going to enjoy the game, so you convince them to play. But you might also have friends who on the DL have been listening to Critical Role for a couple of
Yeah.
years and are holding out hope that they're going to be in a Critical Role game. And then when they start playing, they're the players that are ready to level up, that have all their abilities memorized and everything else. And the other casuals are going to kind of create maybe not as much fun as they thought they were going to have. So it's one of those things that you definitely want to put out there, like, hey, we're all new to this and we're all kind of getting the hang of it. And so everything's going to be very casual and we're just going to learn the rules in the game together and have fun. So you definitely want to make sure that everyone's expectations are out on the table there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, guys.
Hey. Yeah, we're talking about getting started by like kind of gathering up friends that you think might be interested and kind of forming your own group out of those people. So
yeah, it's
Very cool.
yeah. The other cool thing about doing that is that if you can get that group, like the long-term fun that you can have a group like with a group of friends, especially if they're people that you hang out with also outside of D&D, like that can be pretty incredible to have that sort of experience, because then you have the shared journey that you've gone on, and it can like spill out into the other real areas of your life a little bit and stuff that that can be a very rewarding sort of thing. But,
oh yeah, because your real world friend, like inside jokes and history and stuff like that becomes like immersed in the game, and then the game becomes immersed in your real life friendship and relationships and stuff like that. And there's also just something really magical about playing D&D IRL.
Yeah.
Like I've played like 5,000 plus hours of Roll20, and like there's been some funny moments and there's been some crazy stuff, but like it's always funnier and crazier like in person, because human beings are just communal animals, so like there's that, when somebody starts laughing, like everyone else starts laughing. There's like this contagious sort of emotion in the air. So yeah, it is a really rewarding experience to get a group of people together IRL, especially if you're all friends outside of the game.
Yeah.
Playing with your friends. What do I know about that?
Yeah. And like, yeah, I don't know. It's hard though. I will say comparatively, it's hard to do an IRL game for whatever reason. Maybe it's because on Roll20 you've had a long day and it's raining outside and you want to have like an alcoholic drink and hold your cat in your lap, and you can't do that if you have to drive over to your friend's house, but you could totally do that when you're playing on Roll20.
Yeah.
So I find it's much easier to keep people like regularly showing up and attendance high and all that when it's a digital game than when it's a real life game. But just like everything in life, the things that you have to work harder for are generally more rewarding. So,
yeah, exactly. And like, if somebody, the other really rewarding thing is like if one of your friends kind of catches the D&D bug, and then you've got like that person in your life who is also like as excited about it as you are, like that can be really cool too.
All right.
I just got a message from one of my players who's not in the chat but wanted to ask a question. He wanted to know, so we've just started playing. I say just started playing. We've been going to like a month and a half, something like that now. But we're playing the Ghost of Saltmarsh campaign, and he is wanting to know, where would our campaign fall on the scale of interest / involvement / excitement, etc. So I think he's asking about like the other players and that kind of thing. I can answer this from like what I have seen, is that there's a bunch of first time players in that campaign, which is always wonderful generally, with minor exceptions. I've had a couple of first time players that have been challenging, but generally first time players bring like a lot of energy with them because they're just excited about everything, and everything is new, and everything is like um, uh, just like let's do it. Like, yes, we're in this kind of thing. So for our campaign, I would say specifically this Ghost of Saltmarsh campaign. Like, people are pretty excited and involved in it. There's right now there's like not really many days that go by without somebody like popping information into like the Discord channel, or just going like, "Oh, is it Monday yet?" or something like that. So I think people are still pretty hype over it. But I mean, that said, I think to kind of expand this a little bit, and Crash, this is probably something you can kind of talk about too a little bit. But I would say that most of my campaigns, kind of, especially once I switched to being a full-time paid DM, like the people in my campaigns tend to be people who are going to be excited about playing, for the most part, and there's generally a pretty strong buy-in to the concept, and kind of engagement and that kind of thing, and excitement is generally like pretty strongly there. And I think like that's why Crash, like you have a really vibrant Discord channel where people talk about like everything involving games and tangential to them and stuff all the time. And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely that difference that I've noticed between people who are casually engaged in the hobby, because like a friend is, or a spouse is, or they're a little curious about it, but not, they could kind of take it or leave it, and people who have actively sought out the hobby and the game. And that's what I've kind of run into with the paid game side of things, is that like I myself am in a paid game, and yeah, I find the group to be like really fun to adventure with, because I feel like every person in the group wants to be there. Whereas sometimes it would be, oh, I know that this guy's here because his girlfriend, drags him along to the game, kind of thing. And, I know that this person's here because they kind of like D&D, but they really would prefer to be writing a book about their character, and not so much having to rely on those stinky dice to make decisions. And yeah, like it's just a different feel, I guess. So,
Yeah.
But as far as interest in Saltmarsh goes, Saltmarsh, I had the most applicants of any of the games that I've run for my Saltmarsh games.
I think I did too. Yeah.
Yeah,
we had
so
we had a
I
lot of
definitely
applicants.
tell that people, and I think a big part of that is Critical Role did a whole pirate side quest campaign thing where they were pirates for like 3 months or something. And I think that was timed perfectly. So weird. It was timed perfectly with the release of Saltmarsh. So I think people were already getting kind of pumped and primed for Saltmarsh without even realizing it. And then Saltmarsh came out and was like, yeah, pirates. Yeah, so I think it's been a lot of interest in it, for sure. And it's also something different than what you would normally get out of Dungeons and Dragons. Like,
Yeah.
if you want, you want something traditional, like that's been done to death. But this is definitely something that's completely new, I feel.
Isn't the Salt Monster also based off of old adventures?
Yeah, which is interesting, because like it's weird that you could say that it's new, but all of it is recycled material. Like it's like 7 adventures from first edition on up that were flavorful enough in the maritime setting that they were like, yeah, let's chain these together and make an adventure. But really, in 5th edition, the focus has kind of been on just exploring the lands of the Sword Coast. I mean, there's some nautical stuff that comes up in like Storm King's Thunder, for example, without too many spoilers. But for the most part, yeah, it's all landlocked stuff. It's all landlocked content. So back in 3rd edition Pathfinder, you had Skull and Shackles if you wanted pirates. In second edition, you had Evil Tides, which I've actually added on to my Saltmarsh games. And then in 1st edition, I can't really think of, other than Ghost of Saltmarsh and that series. I can't really think of anything that was super iconic as being like piratey stuff. But in first edition, you were still happy to just be going to dungeons and playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like they hadn't really needed to add so much more layers to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Uh,
So, anybody have a question? Trasier, Yo-Yo Dog, anybody?
I did have a question.
Okay.
How do you, at least just personally, how would you suggest picking up a campaign that maybe another DM started?
are you asking to pick up to continue the DMing it for them?
Kind of continue the universe of it and
Yeah.
stuff. Though.
Um, well, I mean, assuming you've been playing in the universe, I'll make that assumption. You should know some things about it. I think the biggest thing that you can do is probably just have a conversation, or perhaps a nice set of series of conversations with the DM who's been running it, to try to get as much information from them as you can. Like that's probably where you have to start, because they're going to know a whole lot of stuff about the world and about the campaign that the players probably don't know at this point. So like that, I think that's probably where you have to start. I mean, obviously you kind of know the meta narrative that's going on with the players and the campaign and the story of kind of the trajectory that's headed and so forth. But trying to just get an idea of where the other DM was taking it and that sort of thing is really important. There's also this weird thing, like there's if you're a different person running it, there's definitely going to be a tonal shift that happens when you start DMing somebody else's world, just because you're a different person and you're going to bring different stuff to that. So I think making sure kind of that the other person, like if they're going to be at all involved in your group still or that kind of thing, like make sure they're kind of on board with the fact that you're kind of taking over their baby a little bit, and that stuff is going to be different than maybe they had imagined it. Like that can be, I think, pretty important to have that conversation. And those are probably the big things that I would say off the top of my head. That I would make sure that I did. Kind of, I think once you're into it, it probably starts kind of running like most games do, unless there's, any kind of problems or issues or that kind of thing. But I would have those conversations really early on to try to avoid any issues down the line or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Crash, any thoughts on that?
Uh-huh. Oh, sorry, I was trying to help some peeps join up.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, the question was taking over an existing universe.
Yeah, like if someone's kind of, if you're taking over a game, especially one that's already established, I think, and
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, comic books and Star Trek reboots really do it best. I mean, there are infinite worlds. You know what I mean? Like Adventure Time podcast, they started off in Forgotten Realms, just running Lost Mine of Phandelver for kicks. And by the time they were done with the campaign, they were like, yeah, this is a totally different Forgotten Realms, where there's elevators and trains and crazy races in the desert and all sorts of other spaceships, and like whatever we want, it's there. And nobody was like, that's not right, that's not how Forgotten Realms work. They were like, this is amazing, I love it, here's all my money, like good job, guys. And that's like one of the most lauded and ancient worlds in Dungeons and Dragons, and these guys were just like, well, it's like this now. spaceships and elevators and
We got our moon base.
crazy hijinks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're gonna give one of the players a +10 magical axe because a 5-year-old designed it. You know, and that's Dungeons and Dragons, and it's okay. You know what I mean? Like everybody's like, I would totally play in that version of Faerun. So yeah, like never feel at all like restricted. You know, if you want to run an Avatar game, but you think that it would have been cooler if the Fire Nation wasn't the bad guys and the Earth Kingdom was, like, then bam, boom, just change it. It's your world now. You know, like obviously if you're trying to like publish it for money, don't do that. But because it's not really your world. But if you're just running a game for fun and everything, yeah, definitely do whatever you want. Like that's what's so fun about D&D is like borrowing all those tropes. Like this really great dungeon master, Mike Shea, lazy dungeon master, lazy DM. One of the things he does when he's writing notes is he'll put an NPC's name and then maybe like their race and gender if he needs that, and then he will put a trope. He will basically put like a keyword that helps him immediately get into that character. So he might be like, this character is an Agent Smith, and that is like referencing Agent Smith from the Matrix. So it's a very like monotone voice, slightly cocky. He can just read that note and immediately be in that character. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, because like the players are going to be like, oh, this is just like Agent Smith, and they're going to immediately sort of latch onto the trope that you're using, and really they're going to receive it really well. And it's going to help you because you don't have to be an amazing actor to impersonate a well-known trope, and that well-known trope is going to be accepted right away, and it's going to move the story forward. So like never be afraid to like kind of borrow and be inspired by like pop culture and things like that, and never be afraid to modify it to suit your needs. That's like a huge part of the creative process.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, just piggybacking onto that, for anyone who is, I don't know if you should start DMing with lazy dungeon master stuff, but if you like, kind of like after you've maybe had a few sessions and that kind of thing, maybe take a look at some of those things. He's written a couple of books that are great, and his entire ethos that kind of like less is more is kind of great, but it's weirdly advanced in a certain way.
Yeah. It's definitely, I definitely wouldn't say you're learning how to DM. Cool,
Yeah.
go check this guy's stuff out. No.
Yeah, it's much more. It's
Probably the best one would be Matt Colville does some great videos about learning to DM for sure,
Definitely.
and keeping it simple and stuff. And so does what is it, Drunken Dragons? Is that the guy? I know he changed it to something like Stormhammer or something crazy like that, but there was a guy that does a really great series about that. Let me see, Drunken Dragons. I know he changed it for marketing purposes.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Colville is definitely the like the go-to. I think at this point.
He's the guy that with his sultry old white man voice is going to make you feel confident enough to be a dungeon master. Like you watch his videos, especially the earlier ones, and you're going to be like, oh, I could totally do this. Like his voice just gives you confidence to go and try that out.
Yeah, and the good news is you can. Like, you definitely can. So, he's not wrong.
Yeah. And he's got a great adventure for beginner DMs called the Delian Tomb. And it's available for free online, and all of his fans have made maps for it and add-ons for it and all that. I try every once in a while to run like a intro to Dungeons and Dragons game, and that's the adventure that I use for it. It's like a 3-room dungeon, which is another great design quality, is a 3-room dungeon. And I think there's like 2 locations on the way to the dungeon. So it's very much like it might be a little railroady, but for a first adventure, that's perfect. You know, is you're like, hey, you start at this farm, now you need to go to these ruins. To get to the ruins, you go through these woods. Like, it's very like classic, basic D&D, very straightforward stuff. So it's a good adventure to kind of cut your teeth with.
How I guess talking about like starting out with like D&D stuff. Crash, I think you and I have both picked up the new Essentials kit for D&D. And we have both run a
Yes.
bunch of groups at this point through Lost Mine of Phandelver, the original starter kit. Uh, what do you think? Are those good places for people
Oof.
to start?
I think the newer kit is definitely where to go over the original. The original is 5 years old, 5 or 6 years old now,
Mhm.
and there are some complaints of balance issues. There's also some complaints of like excessive combat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the newer one is built around what fifth edition D&D has evolved to be. So the D&D Essentials kit available only at Target, at least until the end
Until
of
like into
August.
September.
Yeah. So anyways, that one it's amazing. It's got like all sorts of resources inside of it too. In addition to like a set of dice that actually has 2d20s and 4d6s. It's got like item cards for all the magic items included in the adventure. It's got NPC cards like Pathfinder used to do. So when an NPC comes up, you can actually hold up the card and be like, "This is what they look like." Yeah, it's got all kinds of cool stuff in there, and it even has like Skyrim style level scaling,
Hmm.
so you can still run the adventure as a sandbox. But if it says, "Oh, your players came here and they're only level 2," well, don't worry. Just take away this many guys and, make the trap do this instead. It actually has like scaling rules for every encounter in the adventure. So you don't have to do that on the fly. Like scaling on the fly is a very advanced like DM skill. And so for a beginner's box, it was a perfect thing to add to it.
Yeah.
It also introduces NPC henchmen in a much more meaningful way. So if you can only scrape together like one or two friends to play with, it even has rules for that, for running your like a small group of friends and not like a big old 5 or 6 person group.
Yeah, I completely agree. My
Yeah.
only caveat that I would say to any of that is that I think the original starter kit maybe has a slightly stronger through story, and I mean slightly. It's not a great story.
Mm.
Um, uh, and I think both kits work nicely. Like if you were to put both of them together, you could do some really fun stuff as well. But for the first time person like starting out, the new one is great.
Mhm.
It's the maybe my only complaint is that the quests in it are just kind of each one is kind of like you just get it off of a notice board. There's not like a story reason specifically for doing it. Um, but I mean that's such a minor complaint for the whole thing.
Yeah, Fandelver is very much reliant on the players choosing the prefab characters that came in the box.
Yeah,
Because all of the prefab characters in the original starter kit have backstories tied to the actual adventure. So it's got a stronger story if everyone chooses the prefab characters. Without those prefab
it
characters,
kind of falls
a lot of
apart.
people a lot of people are like, this dwarf hired us to go to this town. Why would we do this? And you already as a new GM have to start coming up with BS ways to be like, well, this is why you would do this, and you should totally do it because of this reason. Which is a fun exercise as a DM, but maybe not something that a brand new DM should have to deal with.
Definitely agreed. Yeah, if you're
Yeah.
gonna run Fandelver, it's because you're going to use the what's in the box. Like don't don't try to add
Yeah.
on to it until you've run it at least once.
Yep.
But yeah, it's good stuff. I would highly recommend. I mean, honestly, either one. They're both good. Like you will
Mhm.
you will.
They both take place in the same place too, which I thought
Yeah.
was adorable. Because like Lauren said, if you really wanted to go ham, you could get both, and then you have like so many things for them to do. It's like ultimate beginner sandbox with the amount of stuff they could do.
Mhm.
Another great intro adventure is called Wild Sheep Chase, and I actually run that one for kids sometimes because it's so simple and cute. So I'll post that up in the Discord as well.
Here, I'm just going to pop this over into my streaming window, but this is the...
There you go. Yeah, you can copy paste those links over.
Yeah.
But both of those adventures, the Delian Tomb and the Wild Sheep Chase, they're both free and they're both really, really good.
See, I have not gotten this one. I'm going to add that to my cart.
Yeah, and honestly, Wild Sheep Chase would make a fun side quest as well. Because basically the premise is everyone's in a tavern,
This
right?
one I
Great
have.
place to start. And then a sheep comes in, and essentially it needs their help.
Yeah,
And
this one's pretty fun. I've run
Yeah,
this one.
who could resist a sheep? And that's kind of the premise, especially with little kids. Oh, little kids love it. They're just like, what? I want to help the sheep, and it is silly and fun and very, very cool. If you're doing Roll20, there are some pre-made things available that are pretty nice as well through the marketplace. I think it's like $7 can get you a handful of one-shot adventures that are linked together, and those actually have like the minis already built for you, and prefab characters already made, and maps already built with dynamic lighting and stuff. So yeah, that's also a kind of, if you're trying to be a GM and you're not doing it live, like you're going to do it online, that's another cool direction to go with it.
Let's see. Somebody's asking in the Twitch chat who I am streaming with. This is Crash Jim. Crash, why don't you introduce yourself real quick? We didn't.
Oh yeah. So I am a paid DM like Lauren. I've been playing since I was a small baby, like 12 or 13. So I've been playing for about 26 years. I started with second edition. I went back and played some first edition. I've played World of Darkness, Hackmaster, Pathfinder. I was there for the drama that was fourth edition, and I stood by my man, and I played fourth edition, and I loved it. Yeah, I've played every version of D&D, and I've loved each and every one for its own reasons. And I kind of got out of the hobby towards the end of fourth edition, and then got back into it through a very good friend of mine. And I got more and more into it. I helped with like some of the playtesting of 5e when they were just calling it like D&D Next or whatever we were calling it during the playtesting. And I love it. It's a great system. It's accessible. It's simple. It's easy to add on to. So it kind of accommodates different levels of play. And yeah, I run 5 games a week right now, and I play in 1 game. And so yeah, like if I had told 13-year-old me that someday you would get to play D&D 6 times a week and still be able to pay your bills, I would not have believed that was possible. So yeah. Anyways, that's me.
And for those who don't know, I'll introduce myself real quick because we got players on from your side as well. Crash. So I'm Lauren. I have been DMing a while now too. I don't know exactly how many years. I got to it a lot later in life than I think you did, Crash. So I don't have nearly as many years under my belt with it. I missed some of the fun times, I think. But that said, I do have thousands of hours of DMing under my belt at this point.
Oh yeah.
And you said that you're in a paid game. You're in one of my paid games. That's how we met.
I am.
Yeah. And apparently you liked what you saw there. But I've been pro DMing since 2017, since about January 2017. I run anywhere between about 7 and 10 games every week, depending on what's going on at that point in time. I'm actually about to recruit for a couple of new games here coming up soon, so that'll get me back towards that higher end mark on there. It's being paid to DM and being able to run that many games a week, like that is a pretty crazy thing to be able to do. Let's see. I did have another question that somebody came in. Speaking of paid DMing, someone messaged me and said, If someone wanted to put themselves on the glide path to becoming a pay-to-play DM on something like Roll20, what would you suggest? Crash.
Yeah, this I see an answer to this question probably once a week on Reddit. I'm like very very active on Reddit.
Yeah.
And this is a question that comes up a lot. And for whatever reason, man, for the first 6 months of 2019, being a paid DM was paramount to being like on the like sex offenders list. Like it was a bad thing on Reddit and a lot of social media to be a paid DM. Like yeah. But I think people have really started to kind of come around to the idea. There's been like articles in Forbes and all kinds of other stuff that like, hey, this is a legit thing that, you know, you can do. And that's sort of helped it normalize it a little bit, I guess. Yeah, so the question comes up all the time, like how do you do this? For me, I wanted to get a part-time job. You know, Dave Ramsey tells you to go deliver pizzas, you know, snowball them credit cards. You know how that goes. So I was like, I don't really want to deliver pizzas, you know, like, so I was looking at like what kind of jobs are there, and I had seen like, oh yeah, there's like paid DMs now, and I was like, well, that's like trying to be, you know, PewDiePie or whatever, you know, like PewDiePie, like not everybody could do that. That's not going to happen for me. I joined a paid game because I was interested in Starfinder, and at first I was like, yeah, all right, okay, I could kind of see this. And as we're playing, I was like, I don't want to, I don't want to be like that, but I was like, I'm as good as this guy. You know what I mean? That's what I started thinking to myself. I was like, I mean, I'm as good as this guy. So I asked the other players. I was like, do you feel like you're getting your value, you know, your money's worth here? And they were like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And I was like, And so I was like, yeah, all right, I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna try to run one game. And at the time, Matt Colville, who I'm secretly in love with, had done like a back in time review of Red Hand of Doom, which in all my years of gaming, I actually missed that one. And he talked it up like so hard. And I looked around and nobody else was running it. And I was like, that's the game I'm going to run. I'm going to run Red Hand of Doom. I'm going to convert it to 5th edition. I'm going to run it. It's going to be amazing. And so I advertised for it, and I actually had people sign up, and which kind of blew my mind. And that's kind of started things. And then from there, it just kind of, I got more confident, and I was like, you know what? I was running a game with friends, Tomb of Annihilation, and I said, when Tomb of Annihilation ends, I'm going to try to do a second paid game. And then that went well. And then I was like, hey, I don't really do anything on my Friday nights. Maybe I'll try to do another game. And slowly but surely, I started adding more and more games to it. I am definitely at my limit because I have a full-time day job. But yeah, it was one of those things that you don't just want to immediately be like, hey, bam, here's 8 games. I'm advertising all 8 games at once. I'm going to interview for all 8 games at once. I'm going to fill all 8 games at once. You definitely want to pace yourself for sure. And you definitely want to be prepared. I think the most important thing that a paid DM can have is a strong understanding of the rules and the ability to look up and adjudicate those rules quickly. Because people are paying for your time. And if every session devolves into a Pathfinder rules discussion, I think real quick they're going to be like, this isn't worth my time or my money. So by knowing the rules inside and out, you're going to have a much better chance of running a content-filled session.
Yeah,
and that's really
getting the rules out of the way almost, so that you can have time to play.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah, I would kind of echo, I think, what you're saying. I started kind of similarly. I was just playing a couple of games online where I was DMing, which is, I think, the first step to becoming a paid DM is you need to become comfortable with being a DM. So don't just kind of jump from player to paid DM. Make sure you kind of do that middle section first,
Mhm.
where you know that you can handle DMing and the DM side of things. Um, and every person that's going to be different for, but take the time in that step before making any kind of leap to the next one, I would say. But yeah, I was running a couple of games online for they were pickup games. They were online pickup games, like people that I just met online and that kind of thing. And I realized, so my background is like film and TV and that kind of thing, film and TV production, and basically realized that for me, DMing was kind of this thing that was the stuff I loved about that, which is the storytelling stuff, minus all of the part where it's like moving an army around. All of the logistics are gone. You don't have to do all of that stuff. So DMing for me was very rewarding, kind of like right off the bat. And with kind of my understanding of story structure and writing and that kind of thing, like it was something that was pretty easy for me to jump into. And I realized, like, in the couple of games that I tried to play in, that like what I was trying to do was probably much closer to like the Critical Role style of thing, or more that yeah, just more the thing where there's that kind of deeper story and deeper stuff going on, where you're trying to make fleshed out characters and stuff. And a lot of DMs aren't playing that way. So I kind of realized that I felt like I had something that I could kind of bring to market, if you will, that was different than at least what I had experienced. And so I kind of did the same thing. Like I offered, I think, 2 games to start with, kind of like back to back. Like I offered one and like realized people were signing up, so I started another one pretty quickly on top of that, and was running like 2 games, and like that all kind of coincided with being in a job that was pretty terrible at the time, and so in January of 2017, I just kind of stopped the job and jumped in, uh, which is probably not the smartest way to do it. But if you're in a situation that's killing you, sometimes you make big choices, I guess. And since then, I've been, I ramped up pretty fast and have been kind of running that ever since. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. But for if you're wanting to talk process and stuff, the big thing is just you've got to be a good DM before you can do that. And like jumping in, I think the other thing to kind of consider is like it's starting a business, right? Like it's not just getting paid to be a DM 6 or 8 times a week or whatever you're gonna do. Like you're starting a business at that point. So all of the stuff that you kind of need to think about to run a business, like that's gonna be there if you are being a paid DM. You may not know it off the top of the bat, but it's all there, and you're gonna have to deal with it at some point. And so if you can kind of take the time on the front end to kind of think some of that stuff through and plan it out a little bit, and like understand what how much you need to make per hour of your time and all of that
Yeah.
kind of thing, like that's important. You need to know that stuff. And so
You also need to own the commitment before you do
oh
it. And
yeah.
this is so vital to, and I don't mean to sound weird, but it's so vital to the industry
Yep.
of like paid gaming, because the number one thing that you're paying for when you do a paid game is the promise that you get to finish the goddamn campaign. Because in 26 years, I've played in a lot of D&D games that never made it to the finish line. I have run games that fell apart and never made it to the finish line. I have been in games that never made it to the finish line. It is a terrible feeling to invest months and years of your life, and your creativity and your energy and your everything into a game, and just have the game like fizzle out. So if I were to like ask people like, what is the number one thing that you're after? I guarantee you, and I think we do ask that in our game applications for our games, is like, what are you after for D&D? People want to finish the damn story.
Yeah.
So like if you're gonna run a game every Sunday, you better run that damn game every Sunday until it's over. Like I had to talk to my wife and my daughter about it before I started like running games on Sundays, because I said I can't just start this and stop it. You know what I mean? If I'm going to start these campaigns for people, you need to know that for like the next year and change, like I'm every Sunday morning and every Sunday night, I've got to be there to run this game. Like you have to understand that I will not post an ad for this game unless everybody knows that that's what's going to happen to my Sundays. Because that is the number one product that you're selling is consistency. And honestly, I would love for every type of D&D game to be like that, even the casual ones you do with friends. Like it blows my mind that people could start like a bowling team and everyone acknowledges that, oh yeah, every Thursday night we bowl because we're in a bowling league. Like that makes sense. But you can't get that same mentality set up sometimes for a D&D game. It's like, guys, we're committing to all get together and do this thing to tell this story together. And that's what we need to do. So definitely don't take the plunge unless you've looked into the future and you're like, I can sustain this for 18 months or more, because some campaigns do run a very long time.
I literally just wrapped up Wednesday a Tomb of Annihilation campaign that has been running over a year and a half. Yeah, I mean, like, you know, we played that sucker week in and week out, all the way through all the levels of the tomb. And
a great thing to do if you're starting out and you're not sure it's for you is to offer up the 1 to 5ers. So
Dragon Heist, Lost Mines, a new
Dragon
starter
Heist,
set,
Lost Mines, Out of the Abyss, like any of the ones that run like 1 to 5 or 1 to 6, because then you're locked in for maybe 25 sessions tops.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, you can ask the group like, hey, we finished this. Do you guys want to transition into something else? Or do you want to try something else? Or, you know, hey, that was cool, but I just don't think my life can handle this sort of schedule. You know, like, and that's that. So there's definitely options for you. Like you don't have to run a 2-year-long campaign right off the bat. I would definitely recommend starting with like a shorter game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, there are a lot of questions here piling up.
Yep.
So let's see. One of the questions was, all right, I'm going to head home and run a game for 14 and 12-year-old nieces. What things should I know going into this? I helped create their characters, but they seem to struggle a bit on background and story kind of things. How should I assist them without railroading their creativity? Okay, so this is like a really fun question. There are so many amazing techniques out there to help players who are more of a spectator player, which is a type of player, and it is a great type of player. But some players are there to hear the story. They are there to be a part of the story, but for a lot of it, they just kind of want to, you know, interactive movie kind of thing. I ran an entire campaign in 4th edition Gardmore Abbey. I ran it with some very wonderful friends, and a lot of them at the time were still very new to tabletop, and they were all spectators. The entire group. There was nobody there that was like, I'm the leader, I'm driving the story forward. And so I had to put in like a old man, like paladin, like DM NPC, who was basically like the Charlie to their angels, and was like, you know, okay, team, now we're going to go here and do this. And that was all it took for them to start being motivated and kind of moving forward. So you'll often read online, like, avoid the DM NPC, it's a trap, and all sorts of stuff. It's totally not if it's used in the right way. So if you've got like these nieces and they're new to the game and they're, you know, the backstory and the role playing and the getting moving kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
having a facilitator NPC, maybe a mentor, or maybe like a slightly older character that's kind of like, I've hired you to help me, or, you know, like we work for the same guild and I'm like your superior officer, or whatever, to sort of motivate them to move forward, that's like a great way to kind of get the ball rolling.
The new Essentials kit, I think this is one of the things it does really well, right? Is that
Mhm.
it doesn't create that character, but it does give you rules for how to make that character if you want to.
Mhm.
And all of the quests are on this message board, notice board in town. So there's kind of just this simple thing of like if you just want to get your players going, like it's really easy to have a session and go, hey, you walk into town, there's a message board, it says this. This is your new quest. Like, it's really easy just to kind of like throw that at players and have them go, oh, well, now we know what we're doing. It's a really simple, and there's a card that comes with that set that has the
you
quest
can
on it.
basically hand them the card like Geralt riding into town and ripping every billet off the board.
Yeah.
You can be like, here you go.
Yeah.
And then they are actually holding it in their hand and they feel like, I'm not being railroaded because I picked this card.
Right.
This is my quest.
Yeah.
And then the other part of it, backstory and background, honestly, it's not as important as people think.
People put so much energy into it, and it's not important.
Here's the thing. You're a level 1 character. There are 20 levels. Level 1, you have learned to tie your shoes and put your pants on. Like, you really haven't done much with your life. That's why you went adventuring. Like, your backstory is the first 5 levels of your career.
I was gonna say,
honestly,
your backstory is the thing you're about to do, right? Like that's kind
Yeah.
of the that's what you're generating by playing the game is your
that's why
backstory.
That's why 5e introduced backgrounds, and the backgrounds were so well received that Paizo went and added backgrounds to Starfinder because backgrounds were so well received. Because background allows you to say, "Oh yeah, I used to be a merchant, but now I'm an adventurer."
Mhm.
Done. Boom. Backstory established. You used to be a merchant. Now you're an adventurer. We're done. Let's just play some Dungeons and Dragons. There is nothing more sad to me as a dungeon master who kills lots of players than to kill a player. I should say player character, right? Because we're
Yeah.
recording this. I've
Yeah.
never killed a player. Yeah, I've only killed player characters. Nothing more sad than looking at the 3.5-page novella that was given to me about this level 1 character, and they were just killed by a goblin. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like a destiny unfulfilled situation. I really encourage people to like, yes, it's cool to have like a fleshed out backstory and to be immersed in the world and to have your character tied to the world. But a lot of times I, as a DM, I won't even start to really integrate your backstory into my campaign until you're closer to level 5 and I know you're actually going to stick around.
Yeah, I was gonna say level 5 is
yeah.
kind of that magical spot where
A level 1 goblin gets a critical hit, you're dead, massive damage.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I can't live with that kind of stress. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like low levels are deadly in Dungeons and Dragons.
Mhm.
So it's cool to like have something in mind, but definitely don't stress about it at all. Like,
yeah, well, and I think there's this really interesting thing where you can kind of like add backstory as you go. So like, if you go on a campaign and like suddenly you have encountered, I don't know, lizard folk or something for the first time, like you can add stuff about them to your backstory later. Your backstory doesn't have to be said.
I love
Yeah.
asking people during the game. Like the 1st thing I'll ask people when a character shows up is I'll be like, describe to me the establishing shot of your character. So it's not just like tell everybody a description of your character, because you're going to have like an engineer who's also a D&D player, and they're going to say, well, my character's 6'1", and they are a human, and they weigh 184 pounds. And it's like, that's cool and all, but I kind of want to know like about the character. So the establishing shot, you kind of tell them like, yeah, if this was a movie and the audience is seeing your character for the first time, like describe to me that scene. Like what happens with the camera? Does it start at their cowboy boots and like pan up? Like, does it start at their like cowled face and the shadowy grin that's beneath it? Like, what is that establishing shot of your character? And then it's stuff like, okay, so your character, you guys sit down to eat. How does your character eat? What does your character like to eat? These are cool questions to just sort of like realize while you're playing the character. Because a lot of times, because it's spontaneously asked of you, it's going to surprise you as well. As a player, I've had plenty of characters that I was like, I don't even know who this person is. Because like as I'm playing them, they sort of take on their own personality and their own way of doing things, because I leave room for that to happen. A lot of times, if you do too detailed of a character backstory, you feel pressured to play the character that way. Whereas if you kind of keep it a little loose, you can sort of organically grow the character as you go. And so I like kind of sprinkling questions like that in, like during the game, where you say like, cool, everybody's gonna drink. What is your character order? And things like that, because I love to see the character developed during gameplay, not written ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. That went a little far afield on that question, I think, but
Yeah.
that's
So
fine.
my advice for your nieces is give them a guiding NPC. Probably somebody with healing word would be a good idea, and yeah, have that person sort of nudge them in the directions they need to go. And yeah, if you can give them a couple of like two options even, then they don't feel railroaded, but you're also able to prepare, because preparing for two things, not that bad. Giving them 14 different quests to go on, a little bit more advanced. But you know, saying, hey, there's two things that you could do, and then being aware of that, that's definitely where to go. And then definitely don't stress their backstories. You know, let them just be there, like playing the game and enjoying it, and a backstory will sort of piece itself together.
Uh,
So
yeah, I pretty much agree with all of that. Let's see. I had a Discord, or not a Discord, a Twitch question crop up here.
okay.
Uh, says, did you guys already talk about theatrics? How do you practice your voices? Uh, which, so, I mean, I could jump in on this one.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so I would say that for me, it is a weird amalgam of a whole lot of things. When I was pretty young, when I was a kid, I used to love like old time radio shows and that kind of stuff. So I had this weird fascination with like voice acting and like storytelling and radio and stuff. So as a kid, I already had been working on voices for just like weird random reasons. So I've already got some just kind of randomly in my back pocket from all of that. Um, and then like the other thing that I do is literally if I know somebody's coming up and that I need to have a voice ready, like I just practice it. Um, showers in my head when I'm, if I'm driving somewhere, I'll, like practice it out loud, like just keep trying it until you can do something with it. It like most things, voices come through practice. There's some guides like on YouTube and stuff if you need help actually understanding like how to do voices. There's probably some good guides. I don't know them offhand, but I know I have seen them. So I don't have like specific links to point you to. But yeah, practice makes perfect, and if you're lucky, you got into voices as a kid and already have some, and between like old time radio shows and like Aladdin coming out and me wanting to be Robin Williams, I had a bunch of voices that I could do.
Yeah, YouTube, as all things in life, YouTube is your friend and your teacher, for sure. I never went in for voices when I was younger. I was a painfully insecure teenager. Friends about trying to talk in this accent, so I started making the Valyria special, which is like a blueberry vodka mix, and I would drink that to kind of get over my stage fright. And eventually, Valyria was like just the most like trash Russian accent, bad bitch witch of all time, and it was so much fun. And the accent like cracked my friends up, and it cracked me up, and I realized like there was so much value in trying to do character voices, even if you're bad at it, that I kind of got over that insecurity and that fear. And I was like, you know what? Like, I think the effort is really what people are after there. Now, that being said, it is so much work. And it's something that, like everything, it's a skill, and you just have to keep practicing and practicing and practicing. And yeah, like Lauren said, when you're in the car by yourself, have conversations between a couple of different NPCs to kind of practice switching between your different voices. And when you're cooking dinner, kind of give like a villain speech in your villain voice. Like, just it's surprisingly fun when you let it be, is what I learned. And so for me, starting very late on this, it's something that I'm playing catch up on for sure, but it is something that I feel definitely enhances the game. All right, cool.
And I'm back.
So
Sorry about that. My computer crashed in the middle of all that. So
no worries. Everyone who was on your stream missed the answer that I gave, but that's okay. So next up is we had another question, and the question is from Sunshine. Sunshine says, what do you recommend for technology running a game online, not streamed? Okay. It's good that you put not streamed, because streaming is really hard. I'm going to put that out there right now. Anybody that thinks that PewDiePie is just minting his own money, be quiet, because streaming is really hard. It is a pain in the ass. I can't even stream right now because I'm like, my modem. I have a new modem, and the modem's like very vigilant, and it's like, I don't want you uploading to this particular address, and blah blah blah. And I'm having to fight with it all the time about that. Like, so many things can go wrong. I mean, Lauren's streaming right now, and he just lost his computer crashed. So like, streaming, yeah, definitely cut that out of the equation when you're first starting out, for sure. Because like, streaming, you need an awesome computer, an awesome internet connection. There's so much stuff that is involved in it. What do you need? You need a good headset, or a good microphone and headset just for your ears. Headphones. Thank you. The reason that you don't just want to have a microphone and no earphones is because you have a chance of getting some weird ass feedback, and you also end up picking up like way too much of the stuff in the room, and it's just a mess. Yeah, so you definitely want to always have the earphones, but if you can get a good headset with a mic, that should be enough. But if you can afford like a really nice mic setup, the better the mic, the better quality your narrations, your character voices, and everything else are going to be.
yeah.
So that's step one. Step two for technology, you need a very good internet connection. I have had to actually run Cat5 cable throughout my apartment building, so that I could make sure that I was running games on a wired connection, because I could not hang with the intermittent wireless connectivity that I was dealing with in my particular setup. So now the only issue I run into usually when I'm running games is on Roll20's end or on Discord's end, which is a nice feeling. It's always nice when the buck gets passed to somebody else. I know on my end that I'm running a very, very fast internet. The other thing is, you might not think that you need a super banging computer, but you actually need a computer that has buckets of RAM. That is because Roll20 is a resource hog that likes to run on Chrome, which is a resource hog. So like, you definitely need a computer with decent RAM if you are going to run it, because if you're going to run a game, because man, does it chew up RAM like crazy. Especially as a GM, when you're going to have 1 million extra windows open, because every character sheet, every monster stat sheet is its own window within the browser. Oh yeah, it gets out of control real fast. So you definitely want to make sure that your machine has a very good thing, and you're going to want 2 monitors at least. One to have your Roll20 game in, and one to have all your extra stuff in. At least 2 monitors. So that's the technology question. Do you have anything to add to that, Lauren?
No, I was just going to say, for my setup, I run 3 monitors.
Yeah.
I've got one that has the game window in it. I've got one that is like NPC sheets and all that kind of thing. I've got one that has like Discord and other stuff stuff, if I have a PDF for the night that has information in it, or websites popped up that have things, or whatever it is, I've got multiple windows that I'm using for all of that. Um, the there's a bunch of like virtual tabletops and stuff if you're wanting to run on a computer. Roll20 is one option for that. There's a bunch of them out there, so find the one that you like the best. They all have kind of strengths and weaknesses, and that's its whole own discussion.
Yeah, it's very much like a Mac PC situation.
Yeah,
yeah,
all of them have good points and less good points. Roll20. The nice thing is it all happens in a browser, so it's really easy for people to get to. But that also makes it dependent on things like Google servers not going down and stuff like that. So there's stuff, right, that you deal with from that. Microphone is key. I kind of tilted my camera a little bit so you can see. I'm running a Samson CO1U USB Studio condenser microphone, which gives the full, rich, dulcet tones that you hear now. It's not the world's most expensive microphone, but it's more than a lot of like headsets and stuff are going to cost you. But the better quality you have, the more you'll sound good. One thing that I would recommend, especially if you're not streaming and if you're just running like one game, maybe invest in webcams. It's actually kind of nice to be able to see the people you're playing with, especially if they're friends or that kind of thing. There is some intrinsic value into having body language available to you as a DM. That said, I don't run most of my games with video because not everybody has cameras or is comfortable on a camera. But if you can, like, it's kind of nice. Like, I would recommend that as well.
cool.
Yeah, and all the computer stuff you were saying. I know you talked about that.
Yeah.
The better your computer is, the better the game will be for running online as well. I mean, that's
How do you recommend getting faster, better at adjudicating the rules for 5e?
Read them a bunch and play a bunch. I think is the two things that I could say. I mean, just the more you...
I hate reading. So when I started playing 5e again, because again was there for D&D Next and the playtesting, all that, and then kind of fell out of it, and then got back into it. The kids that I was playing with, you could tell that some of them had read some of the rules, and so we were wasting a lot of time every session, like looking rules up and arguing over rules and things like that. So I just made it a point. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to learn this goddamn game. Again, YouTube is your friend. I went to YouTube. I was like, let me find some channels that talk about the rules. And I just listened to every video ad nauseum about the rules while I was at work, while I was driving the car, while I was doing the dishes, while I was cooking dinner, while I'm walking the dogs. I was just listening to rules. I was also looking for videos that are like the most commonly screwed up rules in 5th edition, the most commonly misinterpreted rules in 5th edition, so that I could... And even after all of that, like I had like 2 weeks ago, a game where I was convinced beyond any shadow of a doubt that you could still stand up from a prone if you were grappled, which you obviously can't because your speed's 0. But like there is so much going on in your brain when you're DMing that like memorizing hundreds of pages of rules on top of that is definitely a tall order. But I'm telling you, the better you know those rules, like the better your game is going to be, period. Because you're going to waste so much less time worrying about rules and so much more time just playing and role playing and having a good time.
I did the same thing about a week ago on your last game, Crash, where
it's completely understandable. And honestly, if you've got good players, they're gonna cut you some slack, and they're gonna be like, hey, things happen, let's move on with it. Another thing that helps me is that I used to be like a little hummingbird with tabletop games. I would be like, ooh, I want to take a sip of this, and I'm going to go over and take a sip of this, and I'm going to flit over here and take a sip of this. Now that I'm running paid games, I want to make sure that my brain only has to worry about one rule set. So even though I love Starfinder, I didn't bother to learn the rules for Starfinder. Even though I think Exalted is the best medieval fantasy anime tabletop game in existence, I deleted all of those files from my brain. Like anything I could do to sort of clear up space for 5th edition, I did. We have a monogamous relationship now, me and 5th edition, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, because I want to make sure that slowly but surely I push all the other rule sets out of my brain so that when people are like, well, what happens when I do this? I know that whatever I'm remembering is the actual 5th edition rules and not the 37 other tabletop games that I've learned the rules for. So that helps as well, is sort of kind of being a little monogamous with your game system will definitely help.
I will also say, like, a lot of the rule discussion comes down to understanding what actions are available inside the game. So if there's one thing that you as a DM can learn, it is the differences between the different types of actions that are available.
Which I'm gonna post a link up real quick.
Is this
That
the
is
quick reference?
absolutely, yeah, it's the quick reference thing. It is absolutely phenomenal, and it works on your phone.
Yep.
So you could have it bookmarked on your phone and just have basically this super awesome cheat sheet. It's already in the resources channel of our Discord, but I'm gonna post it in general chat real quick.
I literally had this pulled up as well.
Yes.
I have this up every game because it's the best. You've got this thing, and
Yes.
look, I know that your actions that you have movement, you have action, you have a bonus action, you have a reaction, and you have conditions, and then you have environmental effects. Those are the things that you have that are on you at any given time in a combat, which is where the rules are mostly going to come up, is in combat, because you're going to have some stupid spell go off that has like weird cascading effects, right? Like that's the stuff that's going to happen. But if you know, like, hey, every character gets gets their movement speed, and there's stuff they can do with that. Then they get one action, they get one bonus action, they get one reaction every round. Like, if you know those things, those are the key things to know. And then you can start kind of going like, well, no, you can't cast that because it takes a bonus action. You've already used your bonus action, and that says it takes an action, so you can't use your bonus action to do it. Like, once you start understanding that sort of stuff, the layers kind of start stripping away, and it gets easier to adjudicate. But this, I have it pulled up here on the stream right now, but this is the best because not only does it have all this information, but like if somebody's like, oh, how do I grapple someone? I go, well, that's an action to do it, and then I can click on grapple, and then it has all of the rules for grapple right in the middle of the screen as soon as you click on it. It's the best. And like you said, it works on your phone, it works on a computer. I posted the link in the chat. You can see it here at the top of the window. It is this web address right here. It's not at all user-friendly of a web address, but it's great. Bookmark it, use it. It will help you to move faster.
And that is called the Tomb of the Nine Gods. The Tomb of the Nine Gods is a mega dungeon. It is the small end of a mega dungeon. It is, I believe, 6 floors. Might be 7. I think it was 6 floors. And it is a grind. It is a lot of fun, but it is a rough ass dungeon. It will make your players sad. And here's the thing: you started off in this big colorful city with dinosaur racing. Then you were subjected to like a nightmarish jungle that was either impossibly hard, or somebody played a ranger, a druid, or a wizard and made it completely trivial. And then you finally make it to this super dungeon that is going to take you like 3 months to get through. So the pacing on the adventure is a little tricky. So my recommendation is sort of to gauge how your party is feeling about hex crawling and take it from there. If they're loving hex crawling, then everything's fine. If they are miserable about hex crawling, you may want to start like seeding things into the hexes that they explore that point them in the direction they need to go. Very much. Like if you're realizing like, oh my god, if they do like 10 more hexes, they're just going to quit playing Dungeons and Dragons. The next hex they go in might have a dude that died, and on him he has a map that leads you to the Tomb of Annihilation. Like it might be that heavy handed. You might just realize like, oh my god, they can't do any more hex crawling. The other thing is pacing wise, Tomb of Annihilation has a very cruel calendar built into it. Essentially, they're like everybody's going to die if you don't finish this in time. I felt like that was one of the worst parts of the design because there was so much cool shit to do in Tomb of Annihilation, but my group was so focused on getting things done before the deadline that they kind of rushed past things that I think they really would have enjoyed. And they would get extra frustrated if they ran into things that were too challenging because they were like, we got to do this because our patron is dying here and we've got to save her soul and this and the other thing. So if anything, I would just maybe extend the time limit that they give you in the published adventure so that they have a little bit more time to deal with, or maybe keep the timeline a secret until closer to the end, and then movie magic style set the deadline to be a dramatic but manageable distance from whenever they discover it, so that they can spend the earlier parts of the campaign sort of exploring and enjoying like the campaign and learning their characters and stuff like that. And that will probably make the hex scrolling a lot more enjoyable. So that's my thing on hex scrolling. Hopefully that answers the question.
I missed the question.
Lauren, are you back with us?
I am back. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
We're streaming today, so of course my computer is not working correctly.
Right. So the what am I saying here? I was answering about Tomb of Annihilation. The question was, how do you pace the hex crawl so that I'm assuming so that it doesn't get too grindy.
Well, I think I caught a lot of what you said.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to knowing your players and what they want to do. So here's the thing, like the way it's kind of written in Tomb of Annihilation and the way a lot of hex crawls kind of work is like, oh, you moved another hex, hey, there's a combat. Oh, you moved another hex, hey, there's a combat, right? Like that's kind of the thing with it. And I think you mentioned the Tomb of Annihilation companion on the DM's Guild, which is a great book. They've already got a lot of stuff laid out. You can use that if you want to. But even if you're just using the stuff out of the book, always thanks Java. I don't want to update you right now. Always have a story reason for the thing to happen, right? Random combats are not particularly fun. They can be like occasionally, but if that's all you're kind of doing is like, hey, you moved a square, now you're fighting a thing, that gets really, really grindy, and is just truly a time waste, because so many groups already don't finish an adventure. Like, why are you doing this, right? Like, why are you just throwing random stuff when there's real story things to get to? So make everything about the story, which is maybe easier said than done. And being about the story doesn't have to be like the main story, but give everything a reason for existing. You know, if those undead are attacking, like have hints about it that is pointing to like the big bad guy. You know, Raz Nasi is out there in the jungle. Spoilers for everything there. He's out there. Like tie stuff back to him. Or the death curse, or whatever. You know, if those monkeys are attacking, like, give your characters a chance to, like, tame one of them and have a pet, or, like, make it memorable and interesting and, like, build the story, and not just about having a random encounter, because that is how your game will grind to a halt. As far as, like, the time limit thing, I've run into this a couple of times. The Tyranny of Dragons, Hoard of the Dragon Queen, and Rise of Tiamat has not quite the same time limit. Like it's not, I think, 80 days or whatever it is in Tomb of Annihilation. There's kind of this pretty tight sort of thing, but that kind of has this time limit of like, oh, the horn sounds, the cultists are gathering, there's there's this Tiamat will be summoned at some point. Like that's kind of a big broad strokes kind of the time limit on Hoard of the Dragon Queen and Tyranny of Dragons and all that. And that stuff, having a time limit up against your players, keep it short, because if you kind of put it out over the whole campaign, that is a thing that is going to corral them and wear on them long term. it's great if you need to create a sense of urgency to keep your players moving in a specific moment. But if it's something that you're introducing in like session 2, and then people are dealing with this over the course of now a year and a half of play, they are just constantly going to feel under the gun, and nobody wants to operate under that kind of pressure. You want to let them have fun role play sessions and fun, chances to kind of meander off down a random path, because that's part of the joy of D&D. And if you put that time pressure on it, you don't get that. They're not going to feel the freedom for it. So give them a chance to be free a little bit. Let them have that. Don't make it as strict. I think the groups that I have run through Tomb of Annihilation, there's this thing where the death curse is like siphoning all the souls, and like eventually it's probably going to kill everyone on in the universe. But like I try not to put a distinct time limit on it, and really the only time factor is if they move quickly enough to save kind of the main quest giver at the beginning, which there's some ways to kind of adjust around that. And I don't think it's really a terrible thing for her to die. Like that just is kind of like it's sad. Like you can do it without making them feel kind of like assholes for going and wanting to explore the cool dungeon they stumbled onto, right? Like that's there's
yeah, that's definitely the big red flag of the adventure for me. Is don't present that time limit to them, and have them kind of grasp onto it and not let go. Red Hand of Doom was on a very strict timeline, and I modified it so that the first like 5 levels or so was more traditional D&D. They kind of wandered the area, learned about the area, became invested in the area. So then when the Red Hand army showed up and destroyed everything, they would be more invested in getting revenge for, you destroyed our homeland kind of thing. But one of the first things they discover when they go up against the Red Hand is essentially a map with every area in the campaign marked with like dates of when they were going to attack them and destroy them. And while that certainly did keep the pace of the campaign breakneck, I think it also created quite a bit of anxiety for my players that, they were just like, we can't stop to do anything. Like these dudes were killing like dragons and just leaving the horde unlooted because they needed to move on to the next threat to the area. And so, yeah, you got to be very careful with time limits like that, because they can really change everything about the pacing of your adventure. So it's always nice to build tension, but maybe if I did Red Hand again, I would probably leave their plans way more open-ended. I would take the map handouts, I would scrub all the dates off of them, so that they have a sense like, oh man, we're under attack, but they don't have like like an actual like date by date agenda of when everything is going to go down, so that we could play it a little bit more loose next time is how I'd want to do it.
Yeah, agreed.
So.
That's kind of my general takeaway on any timed stuff is the looser the better. The more you can kind of fudge it as the DM to make sure your players are having fun, the better.
All right. So a question comes in. I would like to ask about building a sandbox and adapting on the fly. So, I guess I'll start this off real quick. Sandbox gameplay is incredibly fun. Sandbox gameplay is also, in my opinion, one of the hardest things to do, because you have to have a lot of improvisational skills, not just improvisational acting skills, but improvisational storytelling and writing skills. There are a billion resources that can make this job easier. Literally, like if somebody goes to a town, I can go online and I could say, generate me a town right now. And the internet will give me a town. And then I'll say, they say, oh, we want to go to a tavern. I say, cool, this town has 2 taverns. These are the names. They say, cool, I go in, I want to order some food. I'm like, no problem. Randomly generate a fantasy menu. Boom. Like if you want to run a game like that, you need to start collecting mad crazy generator links. I mean, that is going to be one of the biggest godsends that you can get a hold of is random generator links. You start with randomfantasynamegenerator.com or whatever, and you just branch out from there. Donjon is another amazing website with generators. And there's even better ones than that out there that can basically just create a world for you on the fly. One thing that does make a sandbox game more difficult is playing on Roll20. If you establish a standard for like incredibly sexy maps that are all dynamically lit and all that kind of stuff, sandboxing becomes way more stressful because how am I supposed to have every conceivable thing already built and ready? That's crazy talk. So you have to kind of let your players know ahead of time, like, hey, it's cool if you want to play, if we want to do this a little bit more sandbox, but you got to understand that I'm going to need some load times. You know what I mean? Like
it's either
if
that
you're,
or maps are going to look like drawing on a whiteboard,
or you're going to go old school, right? Like that, it complete with stains is exactly what my friends and I used when we were kids. I bought from a game store. It cost, I think, $40 at the time, like a neoprene mat like that. And we had our, vis-a-vis dry, wet erase markers. They weren't even dry erase or wet erase. And we just had to draw everything on the map. Like sometimes a sneaker would have to be a dragon miniature. Like we did what we had to do as poor children to get by. So like that's something to keep in mind. Now I've been fortunate because of all like the Renaissance of Dungeons and Dragons, like all the beautiful maps and everything else. And almost as a hobby, I have a test server in Roll20 where I just, I take a map that I like and I dynamically light it. And then I label it for later. And so using the transmog tool, if I am running a sandbox game, somebody might say, oh, well, we want to go into this church and, we're going to end up having a fight in this church. And it's like, cool. Well, I already have a church. So I go to my transmog tool and I go to my test server. I find the church and I pull that map over and bam, I've got a dynamically lit church ready to go. I did run into a certain point where I had map bloat, where I was like, how many forest maps do I really need? How many swamp maps do I really need? Eventually, you just kind of say, okay, you're in a swamp. Here's my swamp map, especially if you're doing sandbox type stuff. So that's the Roll20 part of it for sure, is that it is a little bit more difficult with Roll20. If the standards if you haven't sort of had an open conversation about like asset standards and things like that.
Sandbox definitely opens itself to either theater of the mind, quick drawing, just a map out on a whiteboard, that sort of thing. Like you said, random generators are great. The big thing, take notes if you use them. Because your character or your players are going to be really annoying and they're going to want to go back to that town and drink the same stupid drink again.
Even if you just use the Windows snipping tool or the Mac snapshot tool, like take a snapshot of that freaking table result and then just save it with the campaign name and date, even if you have to, because then you could store them all in a folder and you can search through them if you need them again later.
That random stupid drow character that you made is going to turn out to be like their best friend and is going to want to travel with, and like he's going to need a whole backstory and stuff eventually. Like all of this is going to come up, so just be aware. Like you said, the improvisational side of it is not just the story stuff, but there's all the other little trickle down effects of it. It's cool, and the more prep you can do, like if you know kind of your big game map and that kind of thing, kind of like, oh, over here there's this thing, and like you have to do some prep on the front end, but you can't prep for all of the things. The more you can improv, the better everyone is at kind of using their imagination to fill in the gaps. All of that is going to be really helpful to you running that sort of campaign.
You can collect pictures of fantasy locations because you don't necessarily need a map of a town if you have a cool picture of a town. You could just throw the picture up and be like, you come to the town of Buttbury, and then you throw up a picture of Buttbury and you're like, there it is, Buttbury. And maybe they meet an NPC and you just throw up some character art and you're like, now you're talking to this NPC. So that can go a long way to sort of bridging the gap between crazy cool assets and theater of the mind.
Yeah.
Because some people do need some visuals to kind of help their imagination out.
Yeah, like when I'm running Curse of Strahd, for instance, I've got images kind of like this one that I just threw up. This is the town of Barovia. Like, if we're just going to hang out in Barovia for a while, like, you don't really need a map of the town, but having something like this up on Roll20 is going to just give you a little bit of ambiance and kind of sense of place. And just, you can do that generically, right? Like if you know kind of like, oh, this city looks kind of like this thing, or that city looks kind of like that, go find that art and you can have it kind of prepped on a page and just drag people over there. You don't need detailed maps of everything. Also, just like on the concept of like random generators and that kind of stuff, there are a lot of like one-off dungeons and like rollable tables and all kind of stuff like that on the DM's Guild. I can't recommend going there enough and like trying to find some of the good stuff there, because the other thing that will happen in a big sandbox world is you're going to have a week where you have not prepared anything, because life got busy. You either had work stuff that came up, or like that your kid got sick, or whatever it is that happened, and then you're going to come up on game night and you did not have time to prep a thing. Having some pre-done kind of like dungeons and storylines and stuff that you can
like having a folder of like one shots and side quests is so useful for a sandbox game.
So DM's Guild is great for that. Sometimes you'll see like cool Kickstarters for that kind of thing. There's companies
like 101 monster hunts, and just random.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely. Sandboxing, it's fun. The flip side is like it can be difficult also to have kind of like a storyline, right? Like giving your players purpose within a sandbox. Sometimes it's really good for your players to have a purpose. Often it's good for them to have a purpose. So don't get just sucked into the idea of having an open world. Like making sure that your players kind of know why they're out doing the things that they are doing is a really important thing as well.
Yeah, Storm King's Thunder is a great example of that. It is a published sandbox adventure, and there is some really cool stuff happening, and they don't do an exceptional job in the published adventure of explaining to the player characters like why would you care, like why are you involved in this process. It definitely is sort of left to each DM to sort of tailor the reason for the adventure, and that's probably the biggest criticism I've seen of that adventure, is that it's a great adventure, but you have to work much harder as a DM to link your player characters to the adventure. And that's one of the dangers of a sandbox game. You guys all know people that have played Grand Theft Auto or Elder Scrolls, and they never beat the game because it was a big sandbox, and they had a million other things that they could do, and they enjoyed themselves and they had fun. But ultimately, they just didn't get tied into the main plot line enough to go all the way to the end. That can happen to you if you're running a sandbox game. So just kind of keep that in mind. All right, we got a question. This is a spicy one. As paid DMs, how do you deal with entitled players? Well, Lauren has an entitled player in his Tuesday game named Crash Gem, so I'd love to see his answer to this question.
Basically, you know how they say to say yes to everything? Well, with Crash, you just say no. No. So, here's the thing as a paid DM that I think is kind of interesting. This is like one of the biggest criticisms. Like Crash, you mentioned way earlier in the stream, like earlier this year, there was a lot of people who were just like super angry about paid DMing, and like it was like the worst thing in the world. One of the biggest criticisms I saw in there was like, well, what do you do with the entitled player? Like now that they're paying you, obviously they get to do whatever they want, right? Like it's pay to win. Well, here's the thing though. Weirdly, being in a paid game should make everything more fair for everyone, because it's not just that player that is there to play, it is all the players, and everyone is looking to be in a fair game. Like that is part of the contract
Yeah.
basically of getting into a paid game. So if someone is feeling particularly entitled or is trying to like push for stuff, um, which to be fair, like it's not wrong to ask for things, right? Like players should want to do cool things with their characters, and there should be an ongoing conversation with your DM if there's stuff that you want to do. That isn't that isn't a bad thing or a wrong thing for a player to want to do. So, so there's a balance in there, you know. But if somebody feels entitled or is, you know, really pushing to kind of always get their way, or gets upset if things aren't, you know, if the group decides differently from them, or if, you know, they want to overpower their character, or, you know, kind of however whatever that looks like. Um, as a paid DM, part of your responsibility is keeping the game fair for everyone. And DMing in general, but especially as a paid DM, like part of what you're getting paid to do is being willing to be the bad guy, um, to have like the hard conversations. Is kind of like how I like to phrase it. DMs in general, you get a lot of the responsibility of the group for good or for ill on your shoulders. You know, if you're not paid, then, you know, if you're doing it kind of as a hobby, then technically you should just be one of the players, right? And everybody should take responsibility. But in the real world, that very rarely happens in a gaming group, and most of the weight of a game is probably going to fall on your shoulders as a DM. As a paid DM, you are accepting that responsibility and getting paid partially to handle that.
Right, like up front, there's no illusions that you are the one that is responsible for the management of the group.
Right.
You have been hired to manage the group.
Yeah. So if
Yeah.
if you're going to be paid and if you're going to do this, you have to be comfortable having that hard conversation. I've had to do that less times than you might think. It's actually pretty rare to have someone that entitled in a game if you do your work on the front end pretty well of like choosing who comes in, which is maybe a whole different discussion. But let's just say, like, you shouldn't just accept anybody into your group. You need to have some standards and make sure that people kind of follow through on what they're saying during the application process. Every problem I've ever had in a game has come from players that I made exceptions for during the application process. So that's that was a lesson that I have learned as a paid DM. But you got to have the hard conversations. You have to be comfortable with that. And if you can't do that, if you are not comfortable with the idea that one of your roles is to be the heavy occasionally and tell someone no, maybe having to tell them kind of forcefully, maybe being in a conversation where somebody gets angry with you, maybe where someone rage quits your game, or where you have to kick someone out of a game in extreme situations, then paid DMing is not the job for you. Because that is part of it. You know, personal management, dealing, you know, interpersonal management. That is a major portion of the job.
Yeah.
You can answer
Honestly,
that, but-
yeah, honestly, like when people ask me like, well, you know, you have these groups, like, well, you know, are there big problems and things like that? It is the thing that you have to be the absolute most vigilant about. Yeah, you got to know all the rules. I said that for sure. And you have to be a skilled DM. Like that's a given. But you know, the game is the players. So if you have like players who are in conflict with each other, if you have players who are taking the fun away from your other players, again, you are presenting an experience, and that experience needs to be enjoyable for everybody at the table, and it can't be enjoyable at the expense of other people. In my games, I've even had to sort of start like a consent thing in addition to like a no PvP thing, because you know sometimes everybody's goofing. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, oh well, I'm gonna poison their food, you know, because it'll be funny. And it's like, is it though? You know what I mean? Like, some people are playing D&D because they don't want to have to worry about being bullied or poisoned, kind of deal. You know what I'm saying? So you have to just sort of definitely gauge the group, You know, like I have a group that's been together for gosh, a year and a half now, and it is very much like band of brothers at this point. You know, they can definitely kind of joke around with each other and take a joke and that sort of thing. But like with my newer groups, like you know, you have to ease them into each other. You know, you have to build that dynamic over time. Like you're not just going to snap your fingers and you've got like a Critical Role group. Like that's just not how it works. Sometimes you get just a nice, like perfect pairing because you did a good job with your game applications and you asked the right questions and you put the right people in the right group, and it's like it all works out kind of good. But often there is going to be like an occasional odd man out, and if or odd woman out, and the idea there is that you make sure to remind everyone of your expectations, of their expectations, and of the conduct that was agreed upon before the game started, like Lauren had already mentioned. And I find that often that's all it takes is just saying, "Hey, we're all, you're all paying for this game, and you're all paying for the time. You're all here to enjoy the game, and everyone deserves equal time and equal this." And if you just kind of keep reiterating like this is what we all agreed upon, these are the rules, like not the D&D rules, these are the rules of the group that we have all agreed to follow. That can get things back on task. And all the time I've been doing this, I've had one person that I had to remove slash they left. It was one of those I quit, you're fired situations. And I remember it was like I was like, oh man, this is rough. But ultimately, I knew that it was the best thing for the other, the other players, and it was like there was a immediate change in the game. Not to keep bringing up Critical Role, but they had to cut somebody from Critical Role. So this isn't just a problem that quote unquote normal people happen. It happens to all groups. So you shouldn't ever feel like you screwed up because it's happening. That's important to remember. But yeah. So don't let the entitlement part like play into it. You know what I'm saying? Like they are giving you money for a service. True. You have the right to refuse that service. So if they are making you uncomfortable, if they're making your players uncomfortable, if they are ruining the fun, you are well within your rights to say, cool, find another place to play.
And on top of that, like again, just connecting to the just adding to the concept of the paid side of it, you have to be more committed to the game than to the getting paid side of it in a lot of ways. Because whatever that one player is paying you is not enough to keep them right. Keeping that one player happy is not worth the other 4 or 5 players being unhappy or uncomfortable or whatever. Money is part of the equation, but it cannot be your deciding factor in how to make sure a group is happy. You just it's just something you have to keep in mind, that don't be bribed, I guess is what I'm saying. That's a part of DMing. Like, just don't do it.
I get all that out of my system with my Extra Life marathons, where we have loot boxes and pay to win features, and it is hilarious. And secretly, I kind of wish I could run all my games like that. But at the same time, it shows me how terrible D&D would be if it had loot boxes and pay to win. It would be a nightmare. So if you ever want to find out what pay to win D&D would look like, you can watch or participate in one of my Extra Life marathons. It gets stupid real fast.
Sorry again,
Brendan. Or
all right, so next question. What's your advice for a Frankenstein campaign? Taking official stuff and picking and choosing elements, skipping things, combining adventures, putting it in a different thing, etc. Afra, you have just described being a dungeon master. There is really no such thing as a not Frankenstein campaign. I mean, if there was, they would call it Adventurers League.
That's
like
true.
as soon as a human being was put in charge of a campaign, it became a Frankenstein campaign. You were immediately off script. There is no way to go back. So the best thing that you could do is absolutely embrace what's happening. Just absolutely embrace it.
Yeah. That said, especially 5th edition D&D, the way they have rolled out their information, there is kind of a full description of the Sword Coast between about, and I say full, a reasonably full description of the Sword Coast over the course of something like 6 books, and they're all adventures. So, if you're wanting to kind of like Frankenstein all of that stuff together, and then there's no reason why the elements of Tyranny of Dragons can't be running while Storm King's Thunder is also going on, and meanwhile over in Chult, terrible things are happening on the peninsula over there, and Resurrection has stopped working in the realms, and on and on and on. Like, you can definitely do that and just kind of like let your characters go where they want to go, because that's available to you, sure. Just make sure that you're kind of keeping up with the living world aspect of that, like oh hey, you're stopping the giants over here, but now dragons are doing this thing over here. So just make sure that like the world keeps getting worse, even though your characters are making things better. I'd say is kind of the thing with that.
And Frankenstein doesn't have to be huge either.
Yeah.
So like Pathfinder was really cool about this. I'm running Skull and Shackles on Thursdays, and I'm trying my best to stick to the Pathfinder adventure path. And there are times where it just straight up says, now they should be pirates for a little bit. And that's what the published adventure tells me. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And it's like, well, do pirate stuff. And that is where Paizo would slide in and be like, check out all these amazing one-shot adventures we wrote. Would you like to buy some to use during the part of our adventure path where we tell you that they should go be pirates? And to a certain extent, like, that's kind of awesome, because like there's all these great side quests. We talked about having a side quest collection for a sandbox game, but it's a great way to add a little spice, and also maybe remove a little bit of the brevity of a serious campaign by having some opportunities where it's like, well, now you're going to go help this magic sheep. You know what I mean? So it's okay to definitely, if you see like a cool, like one shot or whatever, just kind of squish it into your game. If there's like you want to have a carnival, be like, all right, there's a carnival. Now there's a carnival in your game. Nobody from Wizards of the Coast is going to come to your house and SWAT team you for going off script. You could definitely like pick and choose what you think your players would like and what you would enjoy running.
Yeah, definitely. I think every game I've ever run, I have pulled custom stuff into it, either because of character backstory or whatever the reason, or just to like make something make more sense, or because players did something I wasn't expecting, or whatever it is. That's the fun of D&D, is that you're going to go off script a little bit. Don't be
and some people cut the fat too.
Yeah.
Like I see people offering to run Tomb of Annihilation all the time, and it straight up says Tomb only. So there's no Port Nyanzaru, there's no jungle. You start the adventure at like level 8 or something, like right outside the tomb, and you just run the tomb for 3 months. And people enjoy that. Like, that's okay. That is totally okay. So you could also cut content if you think you and your group would enjoy that too. So always feel empowered to cut and paste as necessary.
Yeah. It is your game. Have fun with it. Set it in the world you want it to set in. Get rid of the stuff you don't want to play, and add the stuff you do.
All right, we got another question here. How do you handle the distribution of magic items, making sure it is balanced between the players and yet not too powerful for the campaign, both loot and store-bought? How would you fix things if you accidentally gave a player a broken item? Oh, a tale as old as time. Beauty and the Beast. Wow. I think they have asked that question since the first time they played Dungeons and Dragons. The broken item. Oh, wow.
I mean, magic items, by their nature, break the game. Yes. I think that's just the key nature of a magical item. It is operating largely outside of the rules that have been created to create balance in the game. Fifth edition, especially, is so designed around the action economy of everything and the balance of characters, um, that magic items just take you right out of that. So basically, you just have to assume with a magic item, you are breaking the game by putting it into the game to begin with. That's just the assumption you have to make.
This question does spawn a lot of like subtle side questions, so I'm going to try to address
Yeah.
those. First and foremost, choosing magic items. Do not, I repeat, do not feel obligated to use treasure that makes you uncomfortable.
Mhm.
If there is an adventure called Sunless Citadel, it has an amazing sword. I think the sword's name is Shatterspike or something like that. Shatterspike is a bulldozer. Shadowspike can bulldoze things. It's kind of crazy. In the edition that it came out in, third edition, there were mechanics for sundering and dealing damage to objects and all that. There are not those mechanics in fifth edition. Yet the sword somehow made it to fifth edition. So this is a magic item that will suddenly change a lot of things about your game, because now there's a cave in. Okay, I take out Shatterspike and I smash the cave in until it's gone, Minecraft style. So there's things that you always want to look at a magical item, even if it's in your published adventure, and you want to look at the player characters that you have, and you want to ask yourself, is this really a good fit for this group? Is this really a good fit for this campaign? Can I, as a DM, live with this item being in the game? You don't want to roll a random treasure stash, even in your completely sandbox, randomly generated campaign, and have the deck of many things show up unless you're willing to deal with the consequences of the deck of many things showing up. If you already have a character in the party who's got a 27 armor class because they can cast shield and are wearing plate mail, and you gave them a amazing item, and the venture says, well, they just found a +3 shield. Maybe they didn't. Maybe you really don't need a +3 shield added into the crap you're already dealing with. You are the game engine.
Mhm.
You need to make the appropriate decisions for these kind of things as they come in. Items to always be wary of in 5th edition: anything that affects armor class. Bounded accuracy is a thing. Getting your armor class too high is actually very easy, and honestly, it can take away a lot of fun for the player when they become so OP juggernaut that no session ever becomes a challenge for them.
Yeah.
So you definitely want to be cautious of anything that gives AC boosts. Anything that jacks up the action economy. Illusionist gloves, for example, allow you to cast cantrip as a bonus action. That's great unless you're the super spec ultimate Eldritch Blast user who is now shooting 6 Eldritch Blasts per turn. Right? So there's all these items that were designed, but you can never design around every party. Other things you've got to avoid: never, ever, ever give an item that allows someone to concentrate on more than one spell at a time. That's one of the most common broken items in 5th edition. Is, I made this cool item because I thought it'd be cool if they could concentrate on more than one spell at once, and now my game is ruined. And it's like, you damn right it's ruined. Like, the concentration requirement is one of the only things holding back 5th edition Magic. 5th edition Magic is very strong.
Yes.
Very strong.
Yes.
With very few things that are holding it back.
Yeah. Concentration
so
is one of
those-
the main mechanics you do not break.
Yes. So armor class, action economy, and concentration
Yeah.
are the things that you do not want to derp with any of that stuff.
And there's some significant guidance in the DM's guide about this. They specifically kind of tell you, like, don't hand out a lot of magical items. Like that that is part of kind of what they do. And they really try to push the idea that a +1 weapon or a +1 armor is a really big deal. Because
Or
it
just
is.
or just an enchanted sword.
Yeah.
It doesn't even give you a +1. It just allows you to hit magic stuff.
Yeah, as long as
Like,
it's silvered,
You
yeah.
can hit ghosts now. Yeah,
Yeah.
like, so you don't have to do this. Here's the thing about magic items also. As soon as you get a magic item, you are operating outside of the brochure. You are no longer a level 5 fighter. You are a level 5 fighter with spicy pepperoni sprinkled on top. Therefore, uh, if it's an organic game that requires you to balance it, well, there are now kobolds that can disengage as a bonus action. There are now ogres who have the brawler feat. The tavern brawler feat. You are well within your rights to change things up to continue to provide a challenge for the players because they're there to be challenged. The game is not, I mean, I guess it might be fun for some people, but the game is more fun when it is challenging. When you feel like the things that you have done were hard and the rewards were well earned. So if you've got people that are loaded up with magical items, it is totally okay to be like, yeah, this carrion crawler, he ate 3 other carrion crawlers for breakfast. He is huge. He's got a 25-foot reach on his tentacles. He could do all this stuff. This is something that as you play the game, you will get more and more comfortable sort of making these adjustments to continue to challenge your players. When you're first starting out DMing, definitely limit magic items. Limit the hell out of magic items. You want to be that cool dad, and you want to hand out presents and stuff, but you've got to only do stuff that you can handle.
Here's the other thing that I would say. This goes beyond magic items. This is kind of the DM role that you are filling. Again, you are there to have the hard conversations, and you need to have that before you start playing conversation, whether you call it a session 0, whether it's some kind of survey that you send out, whatever it is. Part of your contract at the gaming table is that if something is overpowered and taking away the fun of the game, you as the DM need to be able to address it and have that be okay with the players. That conversation needs to happen way, way, way early on in the campaign. This applies to if somebody is doing something with a character and they've min-maxed to an extent that they are the only person having any enjoyment in combat. This applies to magic items. This applies to homebrew content, everything. If something is getting in the way of the group having fun, you need to address it and not just let it sit there. So it's okay as a DM to make mistakes as long as you are willing to address them with the group. And sometimes you'll introduce a magical item and go, well, that is not working. We need to address that. Like, I know I gave it to you. Let's replace it with something else. Let's nerf it. Let's do whatever we do. Video games do this all the time, right? Like, they are constantly rebalancing stuff.
Yeah. We've all been playing MMOs, and your class and build is the best thing ever. And then the Tuesday patch comes, and you're hot garbage.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
There is a precedent for it. It has always been a thing.
Yeah.
It's much better to sit down like 2 adults and talk to your player and be like, hey, when I gave you this amazing flaming whip, I thought it was cool. And boy, is it cool. But it's maybe a little too cool. Yeah. So we're going to have to dial it back a little bit. That's a way better experience for everyone than being like, and then a bone rust dragon comes in and he breezes bone rust breath weapon at you and it melts your whip and you don't have it anymore. Like, that's, it's way better and more adult to just be like, hey, it's an organic game. This was a mistake. We're gonna need to dial it back, sort of thing.
Yeah. That is, I mean, if there is one skill to have as a DM, it is to be willing to have the conversation like an adult. Like, that is what the game should be. And that will solve probably 90% of your problems at the table, is if just you can have the conversation with someone without anger, without anything, just like, hey, here's a thing we need to talk about. Let's have this conversation. That is
also evenly distributing magic items. So this is tricky. I love groups that that have a party charter, that have agreed as a group, like, how they're going to deal with loot and how they're going to hand it out. I'm going to go out in here and say it. I kind of despise groups that is free-for-all loot, because inevitably, in my experience, it leads to hurt feelings, bickering. The cleric who got snubbed on loot just forgets to cast Healing Word when it's clutch for a certain character. and so on and so forth, right? Like human beings are human beings. You know what I mean? So it might sound really cool, like, yeah, let's just free for all this thing. Trust me, it is a flower bed for toxic plants to grow in for sure.
Well, this is
It can be fun, and if everybody is having fun, then keep going, and that's cool. But what you could do if there's a couple of players who are getting snubbed and they're just not finding magic items, you could do things that would essentially deliver a magic item into their hands. So maybe Loot Hungry Boy, he runs up and he opens the chest and he starts looting it, and there's electrum pieces in there. Throw that trash at him. And then the player who never finds anything is like, well, I guess while he's doing that, I'm gonna go poke through these bones over here in the corner. And it's like you just sort of copy paste the contents of the chest. Oh, they're actually buried under these bones. And now that guy who is never lucky enough or fast enough to get on free fall loot suddenly has some loot also. And now you are starting to even the playing field a little bit. Is it cheating? No, you're the dungeon master. Is it making everyone have more fun? Yes, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is kind of so in a lot of my games, especially playing with new players or people who are new to playing with me, like I just generally have kind of a no player versus player action rule, right? Like that's just kind of a thing. And to me, kind of the like the loot ninja-ing kind of thing, like that is a PvP action. That like, oh, I found the loot, I keep it because it's worth money, or I can use it, or whatever. Loot is D&D at its core is a game about groups working together to overcome obstacles, except in certain situations where groups have agreed that that is not the game they want to play. But that is the standard gameplay of D&D, is to work together as a team to try to overcome obstacles and to push further into a story. Loot division should be part of that. Yeah, I basically agree with everything Crash was just saying. But yeah, you just need to work that into the process. It's generally better for everyone to come to a decision democratically about who gets the loot versus just somebody kind of ninjaing it out from everybody else.
All right. Let's see. Another question. Sometimes there's a discrepancy between players' abilities in combat encounters. Some players are more tactical than others and can handle deadlier encounters, while others prefer a much simpler combat experience. How do you balance encounters if you find that you have a mix of these kinds of players? Ooh, that is a great question.
That is a good question.
Yeah. And actually, Lauren and I were discussing this before it even started. But
yeah. So okay. Here's the thing. There's a couple of things at play here. First of all, combat, while being a tactical exercise, should also be generally an extension of the storytelling. If it is an extension of the storytelling, if it is pushing the story forward, that will help engage the people who are less tactical, because they are going to be in it to try to push the story forward. So that will help, first off, with your issues to begin with. As aside from kind of like overall group dynamics and that kind of thing, if you're in a mixed group where some people are more tactical than others, then you need to provide tactical opportunities, and you need to provide less tactical opportunities. Sometimes it's cool to just steamroll through something, and sometimes you need to have that thing. Like all of that is part of balancing out for your group. You have to kind of figure out your personal group dynamic. Sometimes entire groups can be just a tactical group, like they want to focus more on the battle side of D&D more than the role-playing side, or that kind of thing. Figuring out your group dynamics is probably one of the biggest challenges of a DM in general. Knowing who your players are and the things that are going to get them excited to play at the table is kind of an ongoing sort of thing that I think you're going to be trying to balance out your entire DMing career. So, uh, yeah, I think part of as far as like figuring out what works and what doesn't, this is another one of those things where you can use CR calculators and you can do all kinds of stuff with that. But at the end of the day, like part of it is you have to have experience with it, and you just have to like see what works, and you have to be willing as the DM to kind of adjust stuff on the fly. Like if things are getting way too tactical and you can tell your players aren't having fun, maybe your bad guy does some stupid stuff and it kind of ends the combat earlier. If stuff is not tactical enough and is just everybody's steamrolling over things and people aren't having fun with that. Oh, look, here's another wave of enemies. Or hey, look, this enemy just developed all these new skills that it can suddenly use. Or like it's your world, right? Like you're the DM, you're in the situation too. So read the room and try to figure out what is going on. Are your players having fun in the moment? If they're not, adjust the thing. It doesn't have to stay the same. There's cool mechanics you can add. Fourth edition had the whole when a creature reached like half when they reached half health points, they get a whole like as a result of being bloodied kind of thing.
Every dragon in fourth edition had an ability called Bloodied Breath.
Yeah.
So as soon as they got to half HP, they could immediately refresh and use their breath weapon as a reaction.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the majority of my fifth edition dragons can still do, because why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Also, fourth edition, while we're on that topic, did try its best, even though it was the most combat centric of any edition of D&D. It did have some really cool stuff for the non-combat people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I am constantly forgetting to do when I am running games, because it's not built into the design of fifth edition. But it is simply adding things to combat that you can do with skills. So like every fight in fourth edition had things in the room that you could interact with skills that would change the battlefield or modify the way things were going. So it would actually say, oh, a player could come over here and activate this rune with their Arcana skill, and then the rune would provide like a defensive bonus to anybody standing near it. Or somebody with thieves' tools could mess with this portcullis and cause it to come crashing down and deal damage to anybody who is underneath it. Like, it actually went ahead in all of its encounters, and it tried to fit these sorts of they called them skill challenges into combat situations, so that characters who weren't like, I'm statted to frontline DPS or whatever, they still felt like they had cool things that they could do. They even had their knowledge skill system set up in increments of 5, and you could use an action to do a knowledge check in combat, and then the DM, per the rules, had to tell you things about the monster that you were fighting based on how well the check went. And that's something that I still use here and there in 5th edition, where it's like, okay, you've got this super nerd character that's hanging out with these frontline bros, and like they don't know what they're dealing with, but you might actually have like something to tell them. And so they go and they make a knowledge nature check, and they're like, oh, this isn't just a normal troll, this is a dire troll. It can only be hurt by acid. It's immune to fire. And like, well, that changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so you've contributed even though you are not a combat character.
Yeah, and you can also add stuff like let characters, or let monsters, maybe not all monsters, but like if they're intelligent monsters, that high charisma character, maybe they can actually talk them out of the fight. This just happened Tuesday night, week. Right? Like let that kind of stuff happen. You don't have to have a battle if somebody can avoid it, or if you're in battle, give them the opportunity to change the situation.
And it's a mixed bag. Like, you might have a big battle, and some of the combatants are like Giant Spider, for example. They're too stupid to stop fighting. So the fighty characters still have something to fight and kill, and they're satisfied. But the smart bad guys are like, damn, we might actually lose this thing. I'd much rather live than risk dying. Thank you, high charisma character that thought skills were more important than combat. So like you can have both characters shine in the same combat
Yeah.
just by making sure that you mix up your units and their reactions to what people are doing.
The other thing I would add to this is just there are going to be times in a game, if you, especially if you have a mixed group with people who have different interests. But even if you don't, like the ebb and flow of D&D is such that everybody's going to have a chance to shine, but it's not always every session, and it's not every moment of every session. And part of the player contract that they should have with you as a DM, and with each other, maybe more importantly, is that they need to be on board with each other to have those moments where they allow each other to shine. So, you know, if you're the high charisma character and you get into a battle, maybe it's not your favorite part of the game. But you know what? There's also that barbarian who's just like waiting for the option to rage and beat people's skulls in. And sometimes it's your turn to step back and let them have their moment. And then eventually you'll get your moment when you get back into the city and get to have all those great conversations with the nobles who are trying to screw you over or whatever, right? You know, like that's D&D, is that different characters have different roles. So don't be afraid to let that happen some in the game as well. There's an ebb and flow to it for players.
Cool. All right. Let's see. You guys have done this for a long time, running games on Roll20. I mean, would you say running one-shots for free would be good practice to familiarize yourself with tools that Roll20 provides, as well as practice DMing before switching to a paid model? How long before you guys were comfortable asking for money for your services? Okay, so I'm going to break this down into the different parts and answer it, and then I'll pass the ball to you, Lauren. Does that sound good?
So, yes.
Okay. So running one-shots for free is amazing practice because you're going to get all kinds of trash.
That's true.
You are going to get the worst of the worst of the worst. Oh, my God. It's going to be bad. So, yeah, if you could survive that, heck yeah. That is like advanced training. That is throwing yourself in the deep end of the pool with sharks and alligators. And wearing meat for underpants. Like if you think that is the way to go, man, you are gonna get good real fast, or you're never gonna want to DM again.
Good news, it'll be over fast though.
Yeah, because that's gonna be rough. You might also. I know you wanna get used to the Roll20 tools, because another way to get good at DMing is to try to do Adventures League. I mean, they are always looking for DMs, and it is a great way to build more community in your area, and meet people. And especially if you're looking to get an IRL game, you can maybe adopt some D&D orphans from Adventures League and eventually have like your own like steady home game or home campaign. But yeah, to learn the tools and all that, yeah, I mean, it's not a bad idea, and you'll definitely have people sign up. The problem with free games like that is a lot of times people will sign up because it's free and they want the spot, and then they will not show up for it.
Yeah.
It's something that I've run into when I offer to do free games. I found it better to do like, hey, I'm going to donate all the money from this one shot to charity. It's $5 to get a seat at my table. I'm still learning the game and all that, but you're welcome to join, and know that your money is not going to a human being. It is going to help sick babies. And then that sort of serves as like a gatekeeping device to keep just like super casuals from trying to snatch up a spot and then not show up. And you also do something good in the process. But again, any skill is going to get better the more you do it. So if you can find people to run one shots for, you definitely should, like, level those skills up.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of add to that, like, one shots they're gonna test you, man, because those are rough. Yeah, I would say, for me, if I was doing it, if I was coming cold to Roll20, and I wanted to learn the interface and I wanted to learn how to be a DM, kind of all at the same time, I would take something like Lost Mine of Phandelver, the starter set, or the new Essentials kit, or something like. I know we keep harping on those. Any of the short adventures, though, but probably one of those two because they are really designed for new DMs. Whereas something like Dragon Heist or something like that, even though it's a 1 to 5 adventure, like it is. I would say personally, it's not new user friendly. It kind of assumes you know what you're doing with it already. So, but get one of the starter kits. Maybe buy it on like D&D Beyond or something, or get it on Roll20. But the reason
Yeah,
I
I'm
say,
gonna post a good one on Roll20.
yeah,
It's like a double pack called Double Dungeons by Kobold Press, and it has 2 different adventures. One's a piratey adventure, and one is a more traditional dungeon crawl with kobolds and a dragon. Spoilers. And it is great. It's one of those ones I mentioned that has everything done for you. And if you're gonna run a one shot, what an amazingly easy one shot to run, because like everything on Roll20 end is already done for you. The maps are done, the dynamic lighting's done, and you're just sort of like, you could add to this stuff, sure, but you have such a strong foundation to build off of. And I'd say both of those adventures could be run in 2 sessions tops. I think 1 session might be pushing it. When Lauren says that a one shot's really going to test you, it's not just going to test your ability to deal with random players that sign up for it. Running a one shot is very difficult.
yeah.
It really is. I've been doing this a long ass time, and I only started to get really good at running one shots in the past, like maybe 5 or 6 years, because pacing is so important. Like, you have to know when to cut content immediately. Like, you look at the clock and you're like, oh, we're not going to be able to do that. Oh, we're not going to be able to do that. And you have to be able to do that. Now I could run like an entire super adventure from start to finish, for like a 24-hour marathon. And this is an adventure that would take, 5 months or more to play normally. And I could run it in just 24 hours because I know how to set the pace, what content to cut, what content is important. I'm willing to just say, oh, I guess this room is actually empty. Or if it's in Roll20, I will move ahead of the party, and with the dynamic lighting tool, I will just section off areas of the dungeon that they will not have time to go to. These are all the kind of techniques that you need to have if you want to be able to successfully run from start to finish a one shot in one shot. Because I guarantee you the first couple one shots you run are going to be 2 or 3 shots, because you're not going to get everything done.
I agree. So going kind of back to what I was saying, I wouldn't run a one shot if you want to get better at DMing. Like that's personally me. I would go to one of the starter kits and I would run it. And if you want to get better at Roll20, I would not buy it on Roll20. I would go get the assets for it from like D&D Beyond or something like that, and I would build
true.
it. I would build it from scratch in Roll20. Because
To
if
learn the dynamic lighting tools and all that jazz.
you're going to learn how to build your maps, you're going to learn how to make handouts, you're going to learn how to make monsters and characters and stuff. They're not that big. The 5 levels you're going to go through are not so big that it's going to be like crazy overwhelming. You can probably build it over the course of a week or two, and kind of part-timey, right? Like doing it. But yeah, that's what I would do. That is what I did basically, is because the modules didn't exist when I started. But that's what I would do, because by the time you're done with it, you're going to know how to build maps. You're going to know how to do dynamic lighting if you've signed up for Plus or Pro to do that. You're going to know like, oh hey, here's how I can add music and use it. Here's how I move between maps. Here's how I know what the different tools do. Oh, this is how the character sheets work. I get it. I now have built monsters in it. That's where I would start, because learning the technical side is its whole own thing, and then learning the game running side, there is a pretty significant difference between a one shot and a campaign. So just run a short campaign, run something that's going to take you 10, 15, 20 sessions, something like that, and you can be done in a few months. But yeah, that's what I would do.
Cool. Follow-up question: how long before you guys were comfortable asking money for your services? So I used to work for CMON, which used to be Cool Mini or Not, as a convention person. And so I did have experience basically teaching games to total strangers. So I felt that definitely helped with the confidence level. Been playing the game since I was 12 or 13 years old, so that obviously helped quite a bit. Um, but honestly, with all the craziness of Roll20 and stuff like that, and learning all that stuff, um, I set up this mausoleum on my server yesterday that like sums up like all the all the not all of them, but a good majority of the character deaths that I've witnessed over the last couple of years.
Inflicted.
And I dug real deep into older assets and older Roll20 games to kind of pull some of the screenshots of the characters. And my stuff was so raw and so and so honest and raw and inexperienced when I first started. And I'm a graphic artist in real life, like as part of my job. I'm a webmaster and graphic artist in real life. And my stuff was nowhere near the quality that it is now. I do pride myself now on having like beautiful maps and beautiful assets and templates and miniatures and all that kind of stuff, but it wasn't always like that. It was very much like, let me use my my Macintosh's snapshot tool to grab like a square shaped snapshot of this, and now I've got a miniature and I throw it up on the map. And yeah, I'm going to use the same jungle map for the entirety of of Chult. You know what I mean? And then I'm just going to draw on that map with the Roll20 markers to let you know that things are different than they normally were. And Paradise Vale was a hex crawl, and so there was a lot of just, yeah, okay, you want to go into this swamp, no problem. Google swamp, download swamp, throw swamp into Roll20, hope for the best. So yeah, like if I hadn't had that experience, I don't think I would have been as confident being like, I'm ready to do like a paid game. So I think it was. It's really hard to say. I think I realized I could do it when I joined a paid game, and I said I'm easily as good as this guy, and I'm willing to pay this guy. Is kind of when I got the idea that like, yeah, I could do this.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, I've never had a huge. Well, let me back up. So with my background in film and TV, a lot of that work has been like freelance work that I have done. So I am pretty used to being in a situation where I have to set my own rates and have to, fight for contracts and that kind of stuff. And so I was never uncomfortable with the idea of the asking for the money part, like, right, like that was always part of the, I'm okay with that side. The side that was more interesting was kind of like coming to the realization of like, oh hey, this is a thing that I could do and might actually be interested in doing. I think I realized pretty quickly, based on the couple of games that I had played in, that like they weren't paid games or anything, just general games. But I kind of already knew that like the thing that I was doing was generally kind of higher quality than what most people were probably ending up playing on Roll20. So kind of like once I came to that realization, it was more just about like, okay, well, do I have a business model? Is there a way this makes sense? And what, how does this work and stuff? I don't think I ever particularly struggled with it. It was more just kind of figuring out the economics of it and that kind of thing. But I'd had 15 years of trying to work as a TV person to kind of beat some of that stuff out of me. So figure that kind of how you will. Either 15 years or not at all.
All right, we got another question. Have you ever run solo campaigns where it is just the DM and one player? What changes do you have to make compared to a regular game? And how do you handle the extra challenge? What adventures would work well for this kind of campaign? Oh, that is a great series of questions.
I just want to jump in and say that there is one thing to watch out for, and that is the player who wants to do like a one-off solo campaign to explore like backstory stuff. There is the possibility that they want to do like weird sex stuff. I've had that happen to me to me once as a GM. So
Yeah.
just watch out for that.
But if you know about it up front and it's consensual, afterwards you can sell them some of your bath water, and
Right.
everything will be fine. No, but solo games. Okay, I've run solo games. I even tried to run a paid solo game. Um, Solo games are a lot of work for the DM.
Yes.
Because, truth be told, 5th edition is not balanced around one person surviving anything. So, inevitably, and they're also going to get super lonely. So, you're going to need a bunch of NPCs. So, now you're basically running 3 characters, maybe, and all of the bad guys, and all of the NPCs, and all of the monsters, and this one person is just managing that one character. And so you don't have an opportunity to build off of surprising character interactions that you didn't know were coming, because you're literally everyone in the world except one person. And I think it also takes away from, in addition to being more work, it also takes away from one of the joys of D&D is watching the 6 hamsters that are your players stumble around the habit trail and figure things out together. Like, it's their sort of goofball stuff that just makes you smile and makes you laugh. And that's one of the most rewarding parts of being a DM. Like last night, they made like a human pyramid to help Bossy Cleric get up onto a ledge because he was like, I'm going to help everybody up. And he gets up on the ledge and he's like, oh yeah, I forgot the rope. And you could, even though we don't use cameras, you could almost hear every single facepalm like into the forehead as they were like, of course you forgot the rope. And then they throw him the rope and he's like, oh, I forgot the python. So then they have to throw him the python. And and it was like, it was really, really funny, and it was really warm and endearing because this is a relationship that they have built over months and months together. And with the solo player, their positive relationship is with you, and their negative relationship was with you. Every relationship is with you because you are everything to them. And so I think it loses a lot of the charm that D&D has. Now, that being said, the new Essentials kit, available only at Target, it has rules for running a solo adventure, and it has stat cards for NPCs to make it easier for you to run extra NPCs, and for your players to help you run those NPCs. And it's definitely doable. It's just different. You know what I'm saying? It's a different game entirely than Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is very much, as we've said a number of times over the last couple hours, is very much a game where a team works together to overcome adversity. When it is one person, you lose a lot of that. And it becomes a different experience, and it doesn't become a worse or better experience. It just becomes a different experience.
Yeah, the dynamic is completely going to change. I would say, I have not run a campaign 1-on-1. I have done sessions 1-on-1, and like you're saying, it does change. I would recommend, there's a podcast that I have listened to just a little bit. I don't actually know like if it stays, how interesting it stays or anything like that. But it's called 1-on-1, a D&D duet campaign, and it's a husband and wife who they have like 7 episodes. I think they kind of fizzled out on it. But like they try to run a 1-on-1 kind of campaign, and it's interesting. If it's a thing you're interested in, check it out and see what you think. It's a really specialized kind of thing. As a paid DM, it's also a thing. Like, I've struggled with the economics of it. Like, that's a really expensive thing for a person to kind of monopolize your time from that side of things. So if you're thinking of it from
that person would definitively be the entitled player.
Yeah.
Because if they could afford to pay for a 6-person group rate, they could have whatever they want, baby. You know what I'm saying? And at that point, it becomes anime main character situation, which isn't necessarily bad. Like, in high school, my friend wanted to practice being a DM, and he was too shy to get everybody else to play. And he's like, "Would you play in this game?" And this is back before the D&D Renaissance, where you didn't have a lot of D&D players. Like, you kind of had to just take what you had. And I was like, "Yeah, man. Like, let me play one character with a henchman, and I'll play through this campaign." And it actually was Evil Tides, the second edition aquatic adventure. And I soloed the whole damn thing, all 3 books from start to finish, and I had a blast, and I think he had a blast, and it was a lot of fun. And I'm also a stage hog, a little bit spotlight hog as a player. So
That's
it
true.
was the absolute, yeah, it was the absolute, it was the absolute most enjoyable experience for me, because I got to be the best. I was the best ever. And I didn't have to worry about anybody else coming up with dumb ideas that got in the way or arguing with me or anything. Um, so yeah, it's definitely something that can happen and can work. And I've run a solo game for my younger sister, where she had 2 characters, and that seems to be the secret, is not just having one character, because if one character falls down, your other character can help your character get back up, sort of thing. And gosh, we must have played on and off for maybe 6 months to a year, that campaign, and I think she had a blast. I mean, like, I know it was fun to run for her. It was when we were living over in Italy, and it was still before the D&D Renaissance, so like it was even harder to find people to play D&D with. And I think we were just inventing the internet, because I'm super old. Yeah, so it was, it is something that can happen. It is something that can work. You just have to know that it will not be the same as just playing, quote unquote, real Dungeons and Dragons. Like, real Dungeons and Dragons has a group dynamic to it.
Tangentially, Dr. Science over in the Twitch chat kind of mentioned D&D Solo, which is a tangent to this. There are rules. Like, if you get on the DM's Guild, there are also rules for running a solo campaign, which is literally like you playing kind of DM-less as the player through a campaign.
Oh, like a choose your own adventure.
Yeah, we can basically
thing,
take
yeah.
like the books and kind of turn them into that. So there is stuff for that too. If that's interesting to you, check out the DM's Guild. You can find stuff about solo play over there as well.
And other fun games, if you want to play solo, or if you have some friends and nobody wants to be the DM, Kingdom Death, Midara, Descent against the app, Imperial Assault against the app, Gloomhaven. These are all DM-less systems that simulate playing a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and I feel like for the most part they do a really fantastic job of it. And they basically cover all sorts of different flavor, from sci-fi fantasy to traditional fantasy to very grindy tactical combat to Nightmare Murder Simulator, Kingdom Death, to over-the-top anime fantasy, Final Fantasy-esque thing in Midara. So there are lots of other options out there too, if you want to have some D&D flavor, but nobody wants to bother being the dungeon master. So there are other options as well.
I'm just going to mention we've got about 20 minutes left in our stream here, and we've got 2 questions left still in the queue. So we should probably move on to the question about scaling combats here, which I have some thoughts on.
All right.
So the question is, I want to ask about scaling combats. All of my combats seem too easy. I've relied upon a second wave to try and make them feel dangerous. How can I successfully gauge beforehand what monsters to use and how many of them? This is, aside from kind of like knowing what your players want out of a game, this is probably the other hardest part of DMing, is creating combats that feel just dangerous enough. The D&D 5th edition specifically is built around the concept of a thing called the Adventuring Day. D&D is a game of resource management, and having your players kind of like know when to hold back on using spells, when to use them, when to use abilities, when to blow through them. And the idea kind of is that over the course of time, attrition is going to make all of the combats more difficult, and if they're playing through enough of them, they're going to be careful in the first combat, which is going to make it more difficult, so that by the end of the last combat of your day, they're still going to have resources left to be able to handle that. So all combats should be interesting and fun. The problem with D&D, as it often gets played, is that people get together for their game night and you have one combat and then call it a night and then move on. Or maybe two combats or whatever it is. And there's no time to really spend all of those things. Or through the story, even if you're having multiple combats, like maybe through the story, it's like, oh, okay, we're doing this combat and then we're going to travel through the jungles of Chult for 2 more days and then we encounter another combat. Whatever that is, you've had 2 long rests in between. You've restored all of your resources. You're not going through a full adventuring day where you are expending resources. So that's kind of my first tip, I guess, is if you want your combats to be more interesting, find ways to keep your players from long resting. And I don't mean this like be mean to your players or anything. This is actually should make the game more interesting for them. The more you can kind of create an adventure that pushes from thing to thing to thing and doesn't give them a chance to rest or give them a chance to kind of regroup, the more fun they are actually going to have at the table. Up to a point. Like at some point that can get wearing and tiring. But in general, that should make your combats more difficult. Because otherwise, your only other option is to make every combat what would be considered a deadly encounter, which has two problems with it. One, you might use monsters that are going to be way overpowered for the characters, and you're just going to kill everyone. Or two, it says it's deadly, but it's just going to not really be deadly. It's just because they have all of their resources, so they can just unleash Fireball 3 times, and then it's over, right? Like, that's kind of what you're dealing with. Or the third, even worse thing, is you do the attrition thing, which is what you're talking about, where you have waves, and it's just hundreds of monsters just pouring in wave after wave.
Which can start to get grindy pretty quick.
And that turns into a grind, and that's not really fun for anybody at all. The best thing you can do is try to really make that adventuring day happen. You're not going to be able to all the time, and so some combats are just going to be super easy, and you're going to be really annoyed when that monster that you were really excited about using gets just face stomped. It's going to happen. But like if you've got a big bad villain at the end of a dungeon somewhere, man, try to build up those encounters and make sure your players cannot rest. If they try to rest, have enemies attack them in the night so they cannot sleep. Do whatever you can. If they're in a dungeon, they just can't rest in a dungeon because there's too many enemies about. Or whatever it is.
Don't underestimate the value of just ambient things interfering with resting. Like, are they in a spooky dungeon that is haunted? Well, yeah. Every time you try to rest, pissant ghosts show up. Yeah. Not like legit ghosts that are going to cause problems, but ghosts that are going to disturb an attempt at rest. Maybe a regular dungeon is overrun with rats, and every time you try to sleep, rats are trying to steal your stuff, and they're trying to nibble on your ears and stuff like that. There can be such subtle things because 5e is very strict about whether or not you get your short or long rest. It has to be uninterrupted rest. So one rat running into the camp and stirring shit up, that just jeopardized your rest.
And you can also add like environmental effects or stuff like this dungeon that you're in. You can camp out there. You can get your long rest. You know what? You take a rest there, you're going to take a level of exhaustion because whatever is happening in this dungeon, like it is just literally sapping your energy the whole time you're there.
That's a great solution for the Wizrobe problem.
Yeah.
Wizards have a way of trivializing everything, and that's part of their charm. But yeah, when you get Leomund's Tiny Hut, and Leomund's Tiny Hut is a hemisphere, so it has a force field on the floor so you can't dig underneath it. It protects against the ethereal plane. It does all these amazing things. They're going to be like, cool, we use a tiny hut and we rest. Okay, so they use a tiny hut and they rest. But like the next time you catch them with their pants down, like it's, going to be a lot harder than before. Also, they have to find a place to cast Tiny Hut. Also, creatures can wait outside of Tiny Hut for Tiny Hut to end with readied actions. I'm not saying to punish players for smart choices, but definitely if these choices become abusive or repetitive to the point that they start to wear away from the challenge and the fun of the game, then you do need to find more creative ways to sort of challenge and interrupt those methods.
Also, Kobold Fight Club. Use that to help plan your encounters. No, there's a website called Kobold Fight Club that can help you try to find encounters that will work.
Yeah, it's a great website.
It's a great website.
Another thing to keep in mind is situational stuff that is happening in the battle. So goblins might not be a threat to you. Goblins killing the children and villagers around you, that's troublesome, right? Are you adventurers? Are you heroes? Like, does it bother you that the goblins are cutting down orphans in the streets? Like the lady that you helped save from the ogre. There's goblins that are about to carry her off. Like, this isn't a direct threat to you, but it's certainly a threat, and a threat to your honor, a threat to the people that you're trying to protect. So there are other ways to sort of present a challenge other than being a direct threat to the players. So those are other things to kind of keep in mind. Fire is great.
Yeah. Anything or like weird lightning effects, like that you're in a metal room, or we just did that in Mad Mage or something. Whatever it is, like add stuff that makes it harder. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and also thinking about action economy. Goblins are having trouble. What if goblins had flasks of oil and torches, Pathfinder style, and they are just lighting fires all over the damn map? It doesn't matter that they have 8 hit points or whatever, or 6 or 4 or whatever. That fire's still there. They still set that damn house on fire. So now you're having to deal with all these other things. So that definitely shakes people up if their play style is simply 5th edition, the board game.
Yeah.
As soon as you introduce like other obstacles, and again, going back to an earlier question, that gives the non-combat characters something to focus on. Like, you keep fighting the ogre, I'm going to take care of the fires that the goblins are starting. So it definitely adds spice to an encounter.
The smarter your enemies are, the harder that will also get. Have enemies come from other rooms. Have your enemies retreat. Make your players chase them through the dungeon, springing traps and that kind of thing. Anything that you can do, like run into the goblin ambush or whatever it is. Make that make it more than just like 2 sides facing off, throwing math at each other. That's going to be your best way of trying to help make that more interesting.
Yeah.
Even if your players are kind of stomping through it, if it's more of like in movies, it's a big set piece, right? Like an action set piece that you're doing. Like, that's going to be much more memorable if you can have like the part where like they swing across the rope and do the thing, and make it cinematic. Try to add the stuff that really stands out. And then even if it's just them face melting everything, it's fine, because it's at least interesting to play through that way.
Yeah. And maybe you decide that they really do need a challenge. So kind of going with the whole goblins ogre situation, right? So the encounter's been calling for goblin wave after goblin wave after goblin wave, and they are just bulldozing all of it to the point that they're being like cocky to the point of boredom. They're so like, we are the best. And maybe they have these awesome builds that they made themselves or they found online, and there's just nothing that could ever possibly stop them. We are the best. So you're like, okay, well, there's a large looming shadow coming through, the smoke billowing from these fires. Goblins with torches are running around, and a just massive ogre in piecemeal plate armor comes, striding onto the field kind of thing, a massive club in each hand, right? Just like that, you now have their attention and something crazy is happening. And it might just be a regular ogre, and you let them make 2 club attacks instead of 1 club attack. Mm-hmm. But you are confident by now that your party could probably handle this threat. And if the fight starts out and you're like, oh shit, they can't handle this, it's very easy for the goblins to simply just gather around Fight Club style and cheer on the ogre while the fighting is going on. The goblins don't have to be harrying the characters and attacking them and everything. Maybe the goblins think this is great sport to watch the characters have to face off against this ogre. Now, if things are too easy for the players, a few goblins rush in to assist. So now you're setting the pace of the encounter. And if you do enough encounters like that, you will start to get a feel for what the party can handle and what the party can't handle.
Yeah, remember the encounter is a story, not just a little board game that you're playing, right? Like there is a story happening. It is a part of a bigger story, and there is a story to the battle, and it's all connected. And if you can do that, you're again, this ties back to that tactical player versus, you know, person who's more interested in maybe the role play side. If you can turn the battle into a story, everyone is going to engage with it.
Yeah. All right. So next question. Brewdog asks, I want to play around and ask, how do you keep your character out of a levitation spell and ultimately disintegrated? All right. So to address this very quickly, that happened years ago, and you had it coming. And it's not my fault that you sold the powerful re-raise token that was given to you by Thrall, War Chief of the Horde. So we're just gonna, just putting that out there. Laugh out loud, but seriously, I have never actually understood how experience is delegated between a group. Okay, Kobold Fight Club is definitely the solution for this.
I'll pull it back up.
I pretty much just let Kobold Fight Club tell me how much experience points to give out, and I just don't worry about it. I'm like, I very much passed the buck. And then I could say, that goddamn Kobold Fight Club, it gave him too much experience points. And everything is good. That being said, there is a lot of debate. What is better, XP or Milestone? Social engineering in both situations, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
You get players who play in a Milestone game, you're going to run into a lot of things. One, they're going to bring NPCs everywhere they go because the NPCs aren't taking away any XP. So why not bring all your favorite NPCs everywhere you go? Also, story-based XP, Milestone XP, they're going to avoid a lot of combats because they're like, why? We don't need to do this side quest because it's not related to the main story. So why would we do it? There's no reward for doing it besides maybe some treasure. And we know that he's a stingy guy when it comes to magic items. So I'm not going to do that side quest. Me and my 16 NPCs, we're just going to work on the next story milestone. That is the absolute negative example of what happens with story-based XP. But then on the XP side of it, you can also end up with murder hobos. People who view everything as how much XP is in it for me. So both of them have their cons essentially, but they also have their pros. Story milestone, you've been playing for 13 weeks and you didn't gain a level, feels bad. But if you were getting XP every week, you'd at least feel like you got something out of it. So it's really hard to say. What's your stance on it?
I tend to gravitate towards milestones, generally. Unless I'm running like a massive dungeon. Like Dungeon of the Mad Mage, we're using XP because that's kind of the experience that you're in for, right? It's like you're here in a massive dungeon, so we're playing XP. But I tend to like story-based milestones, except for, as you say, you can go like, hey, we've been playing for 3 months and we have not gained a level. Like, what gives? Kind of thing.
Right.
So, kind of the way XP works is obviously every creature, every monster has an XP value assigned to them. Like you can see here, I've got pulled up on the screen, a white dragon wyrmling is worth 450 XP. All of this is then calculated. There's stuff in the Dungeon Master's Guide. It's way more complicated than it should be, but all of it gets added over to because basically stuff adjusts out based on how deadly they consider the difficulty of the thing to be, and it'll tell you like, oh, this is worth 580 XP per player for this encounter. You can do that. You can just hand out XP for the specific monster that got killed, whatever it is. But usually what's happening is you're dividing the XP of whatever got killed out to the players evenly. If there's an NPC that's traveling along, they get an equal share, except they never generally level up in traditional playing. The problem with XP is, like you say, it does encourage murder hoboing, because the only thing, generally, that has specific guidelines for XP are monsters. And if you're killing monsters, you're getting that XP. There's a couple of ways to kind of mitigate around that. Part of that is, like, if you're playing with XP, give the same XP that you would give for killing the group of monsters to a group that talks their way around it or whatever, right? Like have the XP valid no matter what happens. As long as your group deals with that situation, they get it.
Yeah, XP for traps, XP for
Yeah.
diplomacy, XP for great role playing. Definitely consider all these things.
Yeah.
Now, if you find that they are leveling way too fast because you're giving
Pull it
out
back.
XP like Club tells us to, you are the DM.
Yeah.
You can look at those values that Kobold Fight Club told you and just cut them in half. If you need things to slow down a little bit. There's no players union.
Mhm.
They can't go to their union rep and be like, I killed 3 black puddings. I should have gotten this much XP. Like, they don't, there's no one that's going to listen to them. They're just going to be like, too bad. It's the DM. He hands out the XP.
Yeah. So Brewdog, I saw you just asked in the chat here. It is, yeah. It's kind of so if you're killing monsters, there is specific guidelines for it, right? So if there is, in like the example I just had up on Kobold Fight Club, there were like 590 XP per player for killing those monsters, and so you could easily give like, hey, okay, yeah, here's the 590 XP for killing those, or like, oh, here's your 590 XP for talking your way out of this situation. Like either way, you could do it. You can also, though, as DM, and just kind of go like, hey, you talked out of that situation. Here's 500 XP. Like you don't have to do that. Or like,
never pay twice.
never pay twice. Yes.
So
And-
if they're diplomatic and you say here's 500 XP and then they turn around and kill them, they don't get another 500 XP.
Yeah, but it is a weird thing, kind of. So, kind of like a lot of things in D&D, there are basic guidelines to it, but it is also kind of up in the air to what the DM wants to do it. A couple of the newer books, specifically, I want to say Ghost of Saltmarsh has some nice guidelines on how to deal with XP out of combat. It tells you kind of like, if your characters do really good things on, in for character decisions or this or that, or talking to NPCs, or have a really good
super vague
super vague stuff. Yeah, super vague stuff. But like if you handle things in other diplomatic ways or whatever, like there's a specific thing in the very first chapter about like combat is not the only way to give XP in here, and I really appreciate that. Like I think that's a great concept. But that said, at the same time, I'm running Saltmarsh via milestones for my groups that are in it right now, because to me, to me it makes more sense. Like you hit a story beat and you level up at that point, right? Like you're gonna, we just beat the guy, and so now we level up. Like that's, to me, that kind of makes more sense. I've also run stuff like a Tomb of Annihilation group that I ran, where I kind of did a hybrid of the two things, where I was kind of doing XP, but if they kind of got into areas sooner than their XP had kind of caught them up with, that I was kind of willing to milestone them up to make sure like they were ready to go into the tomb, or kind of whatever it was. It's up to you as the DM how you want to handle it. This is one of those areas where there's just a lot of personal opinion and personal choice, I would say. So there is specific guidelines for what monsters are worth if you kill them. Beyond that, a lot of it is it's kind of like saying difficulty checks, right? Like those numbers are in your head as a DM, but not everywhere is a thing where it just says, hey, like here's how difficult it is to break down a wall. Like it's so situational dependent or something that that difficulty might change depending on what's happening.
And it's more work on you as a 5th edition DM, because they don't have rules for a lot of this stuff, because they depend on you to make those rules calls. In a more rules heavy system like 3.5 or Pathfinder, there are literally rules for everything you could imagine. Like, oh, I'm going to knock down this door. Well, is the door made of oak? Because oak has different hit points than maple. Is it iron reinforced? Well, if it is, then it has a higher damage threshold than it normally would. Whereas in 5th edition, I would be like, this door's pretty tough. I'm going to say a DC 15 to knock this door down, and I'm done. You know what I mean? Like, that's the difference to me between like the two systems right there. Is like Pathfinder has hit points per square inch for a door. 5th edition says the DM will tell you how hard it is to knock this door down.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how different the two systems are.
And that's kind of what XP is as well. It's that same thing. It's kind of like the DM's going to tell you as you're leveling up what it is.
Right. It's totally just lets you set the pace.
If
You just set the pace.
The caveat to all this is if you are playing in adventurers leagues, there are very, very strict guidelines to how XP works in adventurer league, which is its whole own thing. It's not how
It's
run
barely
it,
even Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
It's barely even Dungeons.
but yeah, it's basically a board game at that point. But
It's a sport. It's a sporting event.
yeah, sporting event. That's a better way to put it.
Yeah.
Let's see. I saw one last question in the Twitch chat here, and then I think we probably ought to wrap up. Crash. But someone just asked if I want to create my own campaign. This is Kazukin, I believe, is asking this. If I want to create my own campaign, what do I need to start?
Oh, you need Matt Colville. He has an entire series on making your own campaign. And number one advice is to start small and expand from there. Yep. One town, one dungeon.
Yep. Exactly. Start with that first quest and then just build it out from there. You can have some bigger ideas in mind, but start small. You don't need to build your whole world out at the beginning.
If you're willing to be flexible, and honestly, the best worlds were created this way. You start super small and you say, what are the dominant races in this region? Well, whatever the players picked. So you're like, oh yeah, there's a tribe of lizard folk here. Oh yeah, there's tieflings. Yeah, there's actually a cabal of tieflings that operates outside of town, or maybe the town is run by tieflings. But like, if you basically let what's happening in the game fuel your build process, you can end up with just an amazing world that is completely unique because it is essentially a living thing that is building as you play, which can just be so much fun. And also it makes the players feel like they're a big part of the world, because a player might be like, well, my dwarf paladin wants to be a paladin of the god of I don't know, righteous business. And you can be like, that's pretty weird. All right, let's talk about righteous business. And the next thing you know, your world has a god of righteous business. You know what I mean? Like, you could just make these things happen because it's your world, and you can just kind of build it out alongside your players, which is just so much fun.
Yeah, you don't have to have all that planned at first. Make it, just kind of know, if you have a plot in mind or something like that, that's fine. But you don't have to have like, oh, here's every city on the continent. Maybe know like the name of the biggest city or something like that. Know really super basic stuff and have your one location. And that's all.
And just like a sandbox game, generators.
Yep.
Generators. There are generators that will make an entire planet for you with every single region and continent and ocean and temperature zone and geothermal, currents in the ocean. I mean, I swear to God, there is a generator to do everything you could possibly imagine. So like, yeah, don't even stress that stuff. Google, just be like, random such and such generator. I guarantee you it exists.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's see. Last question is are there going to be VODs of this that we can rewatch later? The answer is yes. We will post this. I've been recording it. I've streamed it here to Twitch, so I will get it posted somewhere, and we'll try to put that in the chat. But it'll probably be on my YouTube page, and maybe on Crash's YouTube page if he wants it too. But you can find that Lauren the GM is my YouTube page. Assuming like not everything died when my computer crashed a couple of times, so there may be a little bit of weirdness in the VOD of this, but yeah, we'll get what we can up for it. Absolutely. Anything, Crash, you want to close with, or I mean, you called this thing. I don't know why I'm doing the wrap up.
No, I mean, we definitely went to the time that we needed. If this was useful to anybody and you think we should do it again, definitely let us know, like with some feedback. And that would be something we could kind of pursue. If you think there's something more specific and less generalized that like we touched on but we didn't touch on enough, that might be another cool thing that we could talk about. I've been playing the game a very long time. I consider myself to be here's my swole head coming. I consider myself to be pretty damn good at the game as a DM, maybe as a player, I don't know. But Lauren is a good DM. Like he knows what he's talking about. He has a lot of good instincts for the game. He's able to handle problem players that might be trying to disrupt his game from the inside. Like I definitely wouldn't have been okay with sharing the spotlight of this chat with everybody if I didn't think that he was just phenomenal at what he does. So I think that having the two of us to answer your questions, hopefully we were able to give you guys some insight into these things, and I'm sure this will only spawn further questions. So it might be cool to do a follow up at some point.
Yeah, same thing. Like I would not be doing this with you, Crash, if I did not. Like I know that's a weird thing, but it's true. Like there are people I would definitely not have this conversation with. So, or at least not on my Twitch channel.
Yeah, at least not on the air, recorded for all posterity.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, if you guys have questions or whatever, hit us up on our various social media places and Discord channels and whatnot. And thanks everybody for sticking with us. It was it went by a lot faster than I was expecting. So thanks for checking us out.
Alrighty, later everybody.
All right. Bye.
Thank you guys so much.